The kitchen smelled like onions hitting a cast-iron skillet, and supper was whatever your mother could pull together before the 6 o'clock news. Maybe it was a skillet of fried potatoes with a side of pinto beans. Maybe it was a casserole built around a can of cream of mushroom soup and whatever meat was on sale. Nobody called it farm to table. Nobody posted it online. It was just dinner, and it showed up every night without a recipe book in sight. But somewhere between the microwave boom and the frozen aisle takeover, these meals slipped out of American kitchens one by one. Some of them fed entire families on $1 and change, and most of them disappeared without anyone noticing until it was too late. Number 74 is a one-skillet supper that most people under 40 have never even heard of. And number 31 used an ingredient so cheap, grocery stores barely stock it anymore. Here are 100 easy homemade dinners from the 1970s that no one makes anymore. Sole meunière is a delicate and refined French classic, consisting of tender fish fillets lightly dredged in flour, sautéed in butter, and spritzed with lemon. The dish gets its name, meunière, from the traditional French technique used in its preparation. It first captured hearts in France early in the 20th century, where it quickly became a fixture in upscale dining. Julia Child's profound endorsement of sole meunière, after experiencing it as her first memorable meal at La Couronne restaurant in 1948, catapulted the dish to international fame and sparked her lifelong passion for French cuisine. To whip up sole meunière, the fish fillets are sautéed until golden, then drizzled with a simple butter, lemon, and parsley sauce. Usually served with a side of veggies or potatoes, this dish offers a light, refreshing meal that perfectly showcases the subtle flavors of the fish. Tamale pie was the American suburbs translation of a dish that required community and skill. Masa ground fresh, corn husks soaked soft, hands that had learned the right pressure. The translation discarded all of that and replaced it with something a 1970s kitchen could manage on a Wednesday. Ground beef with chili powder and cumin, corn and canned tomatoes, covered with a thick cornmeal batter and baked at 375 until the topping cracked gold. The result was genuinely good. Smoky, slightly sweet, the seasoned beef working up through the crust. What it couldn't carry was the labor the original required. The communal process, the technique learned by watching, not reading. The lard and fresh masa that no shelf staple could replace. Tamale pie appeared in 1972 dinner party menus, alongside sukiyaki and stuffed cabbage as a peer. It faded with the casserole era in the 80s. The tradition it borrowed from never needed to fade, and didn't. Before slow cookers and instant meals, there was fricassee, a dish that turned simple ingredients into something extraordinary. This creamy chicken stew had roots in European cooking, but became a homecoming dinner favorite in American kitchens, especially in the South and Midwest. It was rich, comforting, and made the most of what was available. Chicken fricassee was the perfect example of resourceful cooking. In the days when whole chickens were bought instead of pre-cut parts, every bit was used. The meat was gently simmered in a velvety sauce made from broth, butter, and cream, creating a dish that felt indulgent without being expensive. Paired with dumplings or rice, it was a filling meal that stretched to feed a crowd. What made fricassee special was its balance between rustic and refined. Unlike fried or roasted chicken, this method kept the meat exceptionally tender, absorbing the sauce's deep flavors. Some families added carrots and peas, while others preferred a touch of sherry for extra depth. But no matter the variation, it was a dish meant to be ladled generously and served with warm, crusty bread. So why did it disappear? As boneless, skinless chicken breasts became the norm, slow-cooked dishes like this fell out of favor. Number 22. American goulash. This had nothing to do with the Hungarian original. American goulash was a pound of ground beef browned in a Dutch oven, tossed with elbow macaroni, a can of stewed tomatoes, and a heavy pour of store-brand tomato sauce. Salt, pepper, maybe a shake of garlic powder if you were feeling bold. The whole pot fed 6 people for about $1.20, and it reheated the next day even better than it tasted fresh. In factory towns across Ohio and Michigan, goulash was Wednesday night. Not because anyone planned it that way, By Wednesday, you were tired, and the box of macaroni was always sitting in the cupboard. Mothers stirred it with one hand while holding a toddler on the opposite hip, and the pot was scraped clean by Thursday lunch. Number 18. Spam fried in a cast-iron skillet. You opened the can with the pull tab, slid the pink loaf onto the board, sliced it 8 times against the grain, and laid the slices in a hot, dry skillet. Hormel introduced Spam in 1937 to move pork shoulder that nobody was buying. The 1940 Hormel cookbook listed 50 ways to cook it. By the end of World War II, the United States military had received over 150 million pounds of Spam, and every soldier coming home had an opinion. Some men hated it. Most kept eating it on a Sunday morning for life because it was the cheapest hot meat in the store and lasted on a shelf 2 years. Your grandfather fried it in lard with eggs and never apologized. The sugar and sodium nitrite in the Hormel recipe gave the surface a dark caramel crust on cast iron. A single 12-ounce can sliced 8 ways fed 3, but you had to slice it thin. Thin meat looked like more meat. Number 22. Pinto beans simmered all afternoon. This is the dinner that runs the rest of the list, because the pot sits at the back of the stove from 1 in the afternoon until 5 and asks for almost nothing. A cup of dry pintos soaked since the night before, cold water just over the top of the beans, a piece of streaked side meat about the length of a thumb, a quartered onion, no salt at the start, because salt at the start keeps the bean skin tight, and a tight skin will not let the broth in. The pot goes on the stove with the burner turned so low that one bubble breaks the surface every 10 seconds. That is the rate, and it does not change for 3 hours. The kitchen begins to smell of pork and onion at the 2nd hour, and by the 3rd, the broth has turned the color of strong tea. Salt goes in only at the end, and a slosh of vinegar goes in with it. The beans come off the heat and rest in their own broth for 15 minutes before the first spoonful, because the bean keeps cooking on the way to the bowl. A half cup of dry pintos makes 2 suppers for 1 person. The leftover beans the next day are better than the first, and the broth is what most people overlook, because the broth is where the whole pot put itself. A wedge of cornbread crumbled and turns the bowl into a meal that no restaurant in any city has ever quite produced. A senior in Hancock County, Tennessee, who has been doing this since 1956, will say that the pot teaches patience to the person who tends it, and that patience is the missing ingredient in modern cooking. The dish is one of the cheapest in the American repertoire, and at the same time, it is the most filling. That is the trick the cookbooks never quite captured, because the trick is the time. Number 17. Pasta and peas. You diced a potato, diced half an onion, fried them in olive oil until soft, dumped in a can of peas with its liquid, added water to cook a half pound of rigatoni. A woman named Clara Canucciari grew up eating it in upstate New York during the Depression and made it famous on YouTube at age 91 before she passed at 98. She said pasta was the crutch her family leaned on when there was no meat for the table, no money for the rent, and no light at the end of the calendar. The potato thickens the broth, the pea liquid salts the sauce, the pasta holds on to everything. 40 cents in 1934. $2 and change today. Cheaper than fast food? Better than fast food. Clara cooked the pasta directly in the pea water because the starch and the canning salt built a glossy sauce without butter. She made it the way her grandmother had on a wood stove. Dry wild rice goes in raw, and that is the part most people find hardest to trust. Pouring uncooked wild rice, cold broth, and bone-in chicken into a covered dish and believing the oven will sort it out. It will. Condensed French onion soup goes over the raw rice first, then enough additional chicken broth to total about 2 cups of liquid. Chicken pieces, skin side up. Foil sealed tight, 2 hours at 325 degrees, no opening. The rice has absorbed every drop of that onion-laced broth by then, each grain carrying the caramelized flavor all the way through. Wild rice has grown in the lake regions of Minnesota and the upper Midwest for thousands of years and was a staple food of Ojibwe communities long before it appeared in any community cookbook. The casserole version spread through Minnesota households in the 1960s and 70s, when canned French onion soup made the grain accessible to kitchens that had never worked with it. The broth is gone. The rice holds all of it. Hominy and bacon casserole offered hearty satisfaction with minimal ingredients, highlighting how resourcefulness defined many mid-century meals. Creamy canned hominy provided a naturally sweet base that absorbed the smoky flavor of crisp bacon bits sprinkled throughout. A light sauce of milk and butter bound everything together before baking, creating a dish with comforting richness despite its simplicity. Families often served it as a main course with a side of green vegetables or a slice of cornbread, making it a complete and inexpensive dinner. Hominy's long shelf life and low price made it a dependable pantry staple, while just a few strips of bacon added enough depth to please meat lovers without straining the budget. The casserole reheated beautifully, so leftovers were welcomed for quick lunches the next day. Its combination of smooth texture and smoky taste made it popular at potlucks and church gatherings where thrifty recipes were always appreciated. Hominy and bacon casserole remains a testament to how modest ingredients can deliver true comfort and memorable flavor when prepared with care and creativity. Toast with bacon drippings carried the rich memory of breakfast into evening meals, using saved fat that thrifty households never discarded. During the 1940s through 70s, seniors understood that bacon grease collected in jars beside the stove was liquid gold for flavoring and spreading. A slice of bread was toasted until golden, then spread while warm with a thin layer of cooled drippings seasoned with salt from countless previous cookings. The fat melted slightly into warm bread, creating savory richness that satisfied hunger and stretched resources. Some seniors sprinkled their dripping toast with black pepper or topped it with tomato slices when gardens were producing. The flavor was deeply porky, slightly smoky, and wholly comforting to those who remembered when nothing edible was ever thrown away. This single slice often served as complete supper when appetites were small. Toast with bacon drippings represented waste-nothing kitchens where every ingredient served multiple purposes. Eggplant parmesan is a hearty Italian-American favorite that layers crispy breaded eggplant slices with marinara sauce and cheese. This vegetarian delight originally hails from southern Italy, known there as melanzane alla parmigiana, and made its way to American shores with Italian immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The classic approach involves slicing the eggplant, breading it, and frying it until it's just the right shade of golden brown. These crispy slices are then layered with marinara sauce and a generous helping of mozzarella or parmesan, and baked until the cheese bubbles with joy. Eggplant parmesan became a staple in meatless meal traditions, particularly appreciated during the Lenten season among Catholic families in America. Gaining a firm foothold in American-Italian eateries during the 20th century, it often comes served with a side of pasta or bread, rounding out a truly satisfying meal. Number 23. Salmon patties. A can of pink salmon, drained and picked clean of bones and skin, mixed with crushed saltine crackers, 1 beaten egg, and a little diced onion. You shaped them into flat rounds and fried them in Crisco or vegetable oil until they turned golden on both sides. Families across the South and the Midwest made these every Friday, partly because they were affordable and partly because a lot of Catholic households still avoided meat at the end of the week. Serve them alongside canned green beans and instant mashed potatoes, and you had a plate that looked like it took an hour. It took about 12 minutes from start to table, and I have never met a single person who grew up in the 1960s and does not remember the smell of salmon patties frying on a Friday afternoon. Few side dishes could bridge the gap between savory and sweet as effortlessly as corn pudding. A staple of Southern and Midwestern homecoming dinners, this dish combined farm-fresh simplicity with a rich, custard-like texture. Families often served it alongside roasted meats or holiday spreads, where its golden hue and delicate sweetness made it a comforting favorite. Whether fresh off the cob in the summer or canned in colder months, it was inexpensive and widely available. This recipe used basic pantry staples, butter, milk, eggs, and a touch of sugar, to create a dish that felt indulgent, despite its humble ingredients. Baking was the preferred method, allowing the custard to set while keeping the kernels tender. Some families swore by a cast iron skillet, while others used deep casserole dishes to achieve that perfect golden crust. Recipes varied. Some included a splash of vanilla, others added a pinch of nutmeg. But the result was always a creamy, spoonable side that paired with almost anything. As processed cornbread mixes and quick-fix alternatives took over, traditional corn pudding was left behind. But for those who remember its warm, velvety bite, it's a dish worth bringing back. Number 14. Vinegar pie. You stirred half a cup of white vinegar into hot water, added a cup of sugar, 2 beaten eggs, 3 tablespoons of flour, a pat of butter, and a pinch of nutmeg. What came out of the oven tasted like a lemon meringue pie that had never seen a lemon. Vinegar pie traveled on wagon trains from Tennessee to Oregon and fed Laura Ingalls Wilder's family on the Dakota Prairie. The acid bit. The sugar covered it. The custard set in 25 minutes at 350. Your great-grandmother called it desperation pie. She made it on a Sunday when the preacher was coming. He asked for 2 slices, and the genius was the temperature of the water before the vinegar went in. The hot water dissolved the sugar all the way through, and only then did the cold acid hit, which kept the egg from scrambling on contact and gave the custard its silky texture. She brought the kettle to a near boil before she started. Number 23 on this list is leather breeches beans. Green beans threaded on cotton string with a sewing needle hung from a rafter in the back room in late August and dried for 6 weeks until they rattle when the wind moves through the house. The whole place smelled like cured hay for the first week. By Christmas, a handful went into a pot with water, a pinch of salt, and a thumb of side meat, and they swelled back to something close to their summer selves. The flavor is concentrated, smoky, almost like a green raisin. Verley Greer kept a string of them on the porch beam every winter, and Foxfire interviewers found the same string in nearly every old kitchen they walked into through the 70s. For one bowl, a half cup of dried beans yields a full single supper. The technique itself is what is forgotten, not the bean. Rice and raisins were a really humble dish. When I talk about the psychological factor when it comes to eating, I'm referring to dishes like this. Rice on its own is perfectly edible, and it's something that people have eaten plain with nothing else for centuries. But eventually, that got old, didn't it? And even in the toughest of times, people needed a good snack, a sweet treat, something for the soul, a lot like how we do now. Their way of doing this on a budget? Take advantage of what Mother Nature's growing for you and throw in some raisins, which were really lovely because they were something that was abundant. You could either forage it, you could buy small boxes in bulk, and these were still relatively affordable, or government commodity drives and distributions would drop a few in your basket. The simplest iteration of this dish is just rice and raisins boiled in water, salt, and a pot. But if you want to take it a bit further, you can also mix in some milk, sugar, and butter, and elevate this dish into something that's a lot closer to a kind of rice-based custard or pudding. Kind of like kheer, from Southeast Asian cultures if you've ever had it. Number 14. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze. 2 pounds of ground chuck mixed with a sleeve of crushed saltines, a small grated onion, 2 eggs, a splash of whole milk, and a heel of stale bread soaked soft. Pressed into a Pyrex loaf pan, slathered with a half cup of Heinz ketchup and a tablespoon of brown sugar, baked an hour at 350. The whole thing cost $1 and fed 5 people with leftovers for sandwiches the next day. Every American kitchen had a version of it. The recipe was on the back of the saltine box, on the side of the ketchup bottle, in the family Bible. Nobody measured. Through the 1960s, meatloaf was Tuesday dinner and reheated lunch and the cold sandwich a husband took to the plant in a tin pail. It survived because it was forgiving. A cup more breadcrumbs, a little less meat, an onion if you had one. The dish carried families through every paycheck week and every layoff. Then, in the 1990s, ground beef got more expensive than chicken breast, and the saltines started costing more than the ground beef. Meatloaf moved to once a month, then to never. Today, it is a chalkboard special at a diner that calls itself Retro, served with mashed potatoes you did not make. You can still pull a Pyrex loaf pan out of any thrift store in the country for $2. The pan outlived the dinner. The name came from Luisa Tetrazzini, an Italian opera soprano so celebrated in the early 20th century that San Francisco held a free outdoor concert in her honor attended by thousands in the street. The dish named for her, spaghetti, chicken, mushrooms, cream sauce, parmesan, baked until golden, spread from hotel menus into home kitchens by the 1950s, where the cream sauce became a can of cream of mushroom soup and the parmesan became whatever hard cheese was on hand. Spaghetti broken to fit the baking dish, shredded chicken, cream of mushroom soup, a splash of pasta water, frozen peas, and cheese, baked, covered for 30 minutes, then uncovered for 15 to brown the top. You did not need to know who Tetrazzini was. You needed a dish, a can opener, and confidence that what came out would be better than what went in. And it always was. The recipe card is probably still in a drawer somewhere. Nobody has touched it since she died. Molasses snow biscuits were the winter morning treat families depended on when cold wind rattled the windows and sugar was too expensive to use freely. Molasses poured slow like winter honey, thick and dark, stretching sweet flavor through dough that otherwise would have tasted plain. Grandma mixed flour, baking powder, lard, and just enough molasses to tint the dough the color of early morning shadows. She shaped them quickly, hands practiced, and placed them close together so they rose against one another like a small family huddled for warmth. When they baked, the kitchen filled with the deep scent of molasses that made the whole house feel less cold. These biscuits were soft inside, with a slight crust outside, the perfect thing to tear open and eat with butter if you had it or plain if you did not. They were born from practicality but tasted like comfort, proof that even the simplest ingredients could become something worth remembering. On winter mornings when the world outside felt frozen, these biscuits made the first hour of the day feel hopeful. They were not fancy, but they were dependable, and that meant everything. Molasses snow biscuits were the kind of food that stayed in families even when circumstances changed, whispered from one kitchen to another, because no cookbook ever bothered to capture their worth. Stewed tomatoes on toast brought garden flavor to supper tables using canned tomatoes that cost pennies and required almost no preparation. Seniors who had canned their own tomatoes during summer or purchased store brands during lean times understood this humble ingredient's versatility. The tomatoes were heated in a small saucepan with butter, salt, sugar, and sometimes torn bread pieces that thickened the liquid into something approaching sauce. This warm mixture was spooned over buttered toast that soaked up the juices gratefully. The combination provided vitamins, fiber, and comfort of something warm and savory. Some seniors added black pepper or Worcestershire sauce to deepen flavors. Others kept things simple, letting tomatoes speak for themselves. The dish appeared on tables across America during decades when making do meant making delicious from almost nothing. Stewed tomatoes on toast proved that a can of tomatoes and bread slice could become something worth sitting down to eat properly. Chicken Kiev packs a punch with its chicken breasts stuffed with herbed butter, all wrapped up in a crispy breadcrumb coating. The dish stirs up a bit of a debate about its roots. Some folks reckon it was whipped up by French chefs back in the early 19th century, while others swear it was crafted by a Ukrainian chef in a Moscow kitchen in the early 20th century. Regardless of its backstory, Chicken Kiev began turning heads internationally around mid-20th century, becoming the go-to at dinner parties and special events. The traditional way to do it? Flatten those chicken breasts, tuck in a mix of butter, garlic, and herbs, roll them up, bread them, and fry to a golden brown. When sliced, the butter inside just bursts out, making a rich, flavorful sauce. By the 1960s, it had secured its spot on menus across America, often served with a side of veggies or rice. The scratch chicken pot pie of the 1970s had two crusts, top and bottom, made from cold butter and a cream sauce filling built from a roux, not poured from a can. It took most of a Sunday afternoon. Bottom crust blind baked with dried bean weights, then the warm filling, then the top crust crimped and vented. 400 degrees, 35 minutes, until the steam lifted the center slightly and the edges went dark gold. The rule nobody wrote down: the filling had to go in warm. Put it in cold, and the bottom crust steamed instead of baked. And you knew by the sound when you cut through it. You learned by making a bad one first. By the late 1970s, the frozen version had claimed enough of the market that the homemade tradition started thinning. The women who knew the real method kept using it. When they stopped, the knowledge didn't transfer. Not because anyone refused, but because nobody asked in time. The tasty meat pie isn't your average store-bought pie. We're talking about a savory masterpiece filled with delicious goodness. This used to be a classic at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners back in the day before hash brown casseroles came to take the cake. But tasty meat pies had their own beauty. Imagine a flaky golden brown crust with a filling of seasoned ground meat, chopped vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, flavorful gravy. The origins of the meat pie have been traced back to the Neolithic period around 6000 BC. Yeah, even the Egyptians were a fan of this classic. It's perfect for a potluck, a family dinner, or even a cozy night in. The best part? Its portability. Just grab a slice and head out the door. It's the ultimate dinner on the go. Number 21. Cream chipped beef on toast. The military called it something unprintable, and the veterans who came home from the Second World War and Korea kept making it anyway. You tore dried beef into thin strips, fried it in butter, stirred in enough flour to make a paste, and then added milk slowly until the whole thing thickened into a white gravy. Pour it over a piece of toast, and you had a meal that stuck with you all day long. The Armour brand sold jars of chipped beef for less than a can of tuna, and one jar made enough gravy for 4 plates. It looked like something from a hospital cafeteria in 1952, but the flavor was salty and rich and deeply savory, and men who learned to eat it in the barracks kept serving it to their own children for 20 years after the uniform came off. Nobody called it meal planning. Nobody called it food insecurity. In the 1950s and 1960s, the kitchen was just the room where you solved the problem of keeping everyone fed, and you solved it with whatever you had. A bag of dried beans, half a head of cabbage, a ham bone the butcher was about to toss. The women who ran these kitchens did not follow recipes. They followed instinct and arithmetic. How many mouths? How many days until payday? How much flour is left in the canister? And the meals they built in that narrow space between nothing and just enough became the real foundation of American home cooking. Not the magazine version with garnished plates and copper pots. The version where dinner cost 40 cents, the table was set by 6, and nobody in the house went to bed hungry. The applesauce was never from a jar. Rough-cut apples with a cinnamon stick simmering on the back burner, while the bone-in pork chops rendered their fat in cast iron, the rim of each chop pressed flat against the heat until it crisped gold. Salt and pepper only, because the apple was the flavor being built toward. Plated together, the chunky warm sauce, never pured, left rough so you knew it was real, cut through the pork fat in a way nothing bottled ever replicated. The pairing of pork and apple is at least 5,000 years old, and in the 1970s, it was still done from scratch on a Tuesday without ceremony. The bone-in chop has mostly given way to the boneless loin now, quicker and carrying less of what made the original worth eating, and the applesauce comes sealed under foil in 4-packs. She never explained why the scratch version tasted different. She didn't think she needed to. You understood at the table, the way children understand things, not through words, but through being present when something is done right. Crab Louie, also known as the King of Salads, is a classic that originated on the U.S. West Coast in the early 20th century. While its birthplace is up for debate, some say the Palace Hotel in San Francisco, others point to Solari's restaurant in Seattle. It always features Dungeness crab, hard-boiled eggs, asparagus, tomatoes, and a creamy dressing made from mayonnaise, chili sauce, and spices. Crab Louie was dubbed the King of Salads by the San Francisco Chronicle in 1914, a nod to its deluxe ingredients and popularity among the elite. It first gained traction in the 1920s and 1930s, becoming a favored dish for lighter dinners or luncheons. The mix of crisp lettuce, savory crab, and tangy dressing, served up in an elegant presentation, made it a must-have at many a high-end restaurant and social gathering. The name came from what happened in the pot: raw, long-grain rice mixed into ground beef, rolled into balls, and when they cooked, the rice swelled through the meat in every direction like quills. Porcupine meatballs dated to the Great Depression, when a quarter pound of beef had to stretch to feed four, and rice made that math disappear. A can of Campbell's tomato soup thinned with water was the braising liquid. Sweet, tannic, cheap, 30 minutes covered, 30 more uncovered. Genuinely good, tender, savory, the rice adding a chew that made them feel like more than they cost. They appeared on American tables from the 30s through the 70s, outlasting the depression that created them by 4 decades. She made them when money was short, and she didn't want you to know. You didn't. You just ate, and there was always enough. Few dishes command attention quite like a well-prepared crown roast. Traditionally served at homecoming dinners and holiday gatherings, it was the kind of dish that made guests stop and admire before the first bite. The ring of bone-in pork chops, arranged in a regal circle, was as much about presentation as it was about flavor. For families looking to impress without breaking the bank, the pork crown roast was a surprisingly economical choice. Pork was, and still is, one of the most affordable meats, and butchers often offered deals on bulk cuts. The apricot glaze, a key feature of this recipe, added just the right balance of sweetness and depth, while a bread-based stuffing packed the center for an even heartier meal. Preparing this dish took skill and patience. The roast had to be properly Frenched, tied, and slow-cooked to achieve that juicy, tender texture. But for many home cooks, the challenge was worth the reward. Unfortunately, as home butchering became a lost art and families shifted toward convenience meals, the crown roast started to disappear from dinner tables. Number 25. Hoover stew. You learned this one in a soup line in 1932 because they were the only kitchens still cooking. A pot of macaroni, a can of stewed tomatoes, a can of corn, and whatever hot dogs the butcher could not sell that week. They named it after the president who took the blame, and Hooverville families ate it 3 nights a week for a decade. And the trick was the order. You cooked the macaroni first, drained most of the liquid, then dropped the tomatoes and corn into the same pot so the pasta starch thickened the broth without flour. 1 pot, 1 burner, 20 minutes total. The whole pan cost 20 cents in 1933 and fed 5. But a single mother in a Hooverville tent could put a hot supper on a folding table with 2 cans, 1 box of macaroni, and a stove that ran on scrap wood. Your grandmother called it supper. She was not ashamed. Number 15. Buttered egg noodles. A bag of wide egg noodles boiled until soft, drained in a colander, and tossed back in the pot with a generous lump of real butter, salt, and black pepper. That was the entire meal. Sometimes you stirred in a handful of frozen peas or a spoonful of sour cream, but the plain version was what children in the 1970s actually asked for by name. Egg noodles cost less than spaghetti at most grocery stores, and a single bag filled 4 bowls without complaint. The texture was softer and richer than regular pasta because of the egg in the dough, and the melted butter clung to every wide strand in a way that margarine never could quite manage. This was the dinner mothers made on nights when nobody felt like cooking, but everyone still felt like eating. Once a staple of dinner parties and homecoming feasts, this elegant yet simple side dish was a favorite among home cooks looking to add a touch of sophistication to their meals. Crisp, tender green beans, lightly sautéed in butter and finished with toasted almonds, struck the perfect balance between freshness and richness. Green beans were one of the most accessible vegetables in American kitchens. Whether fresh, frozen, or canned, they were affordable and widely available year-round. Almonds, though slightly more expensive, were used sparingly, adding a crunchy contrast without overwhelming the dish. The preparation was straightforward. The beans were quickly blanched to preserve their bright color and firm texture, then tossed in a buttery skillet with slivered almonds for a nutty, golden brown finish. Some recipes included a squeeze of lemon or a sprinkle of garlic for extra depth. But as convenience cooking took hold, green bean almondine slowly faded from dinner tables. Canned green bean casseroles, loaded with processed ingredients, became the new standard, and simple, fresh preparations were overlooked in favor of heavier, creamier alternatives. Chicken cacciatore, hunter style from the Italian, was built for tough birds, and by the 1970s it had settled so firmly into American home cooking that Better Homes and Gardens ran it beside pot roast as standard weeknight fare. Bone-in thighs and drumsticks into olive oil until the skin crisped, then onions, peppers, mushrooms, and garlic building in the same pan, then crushed tomatoes, a splash of white wine. The chicken nested back in skin side up, covered and simmered 45 minutes. The secret nobody recorded. Low heat and time could make cheap bone-in pieces taste like something worth effort. The bone was the whole point. It gave the sauce collagen and depth a boneless breast never could. When convenience cuts became the default in the 1980s, cacciatore stopped delivering. Most cooks let it go without a eulogy. Shepherd's pie is a homely casserole crafted with ground meat and vegetables, crowned with a layer of mashed potatoes. Originally from the United Kingdom and dating back to the late 18th century, this dish traditionally uses lamb, as the name shepherd suggests, differentiating it from cottage pie, which uses beef. The typical preparation involves sautéing ground lamb with onions, carrots, and peas, then topping it with a creamy layer of mashed potatoes and baking it until it achieves a golden color. Shepherd's pie was a dining staple in both British and American homes throughout the 1970s, offering a robust and comforting meal. It gained particular favor during the colder months, providing a warming, comforting dish perfect for family dinners or gatherings where its layered textures and flavors were particularly appreciated. The rule was the recipe: 1 can of cream of mushroom soup, 1 envelope of dry onion soup mix, a cup of long grain rice, a cup and a half of water, chicken pieces on top, lid sealed with foil, 90 minutes at 350. Do not open it. Open the lid at 45 minutes and the steam escaped, the rice went dry, and you came back to something nobody wanted. The title was the entire instruction set, No Peak Chicken and Rice, and every cook who made it had a story about someone who peaked, told with the satisfaction of patience, vindicated. It spread through church cookbook fundraisers across the 1970s because it asked almost nothing and delivered every time. It is strange to explain to someone raised on instant read thermometers that a dish could require only restraint, and that restraint alone was sufficient. Swiss steak, a dish that's neither Swiss nor a steak, but somehow it has become a classic on American dinner tables. The name Swiss refers to the technique of Swissing, a process of tenderizing tougher cuts of beef like round steak by pounding or rolling it out. The result is a melt-in-your-mouth meal that feels far fancier than its humble beginnings. This dish gained popularity in mid-century America, when home cooks needed to stretch their budgets. By slow-cooking tenderized beef in a rich tomato-based sauce, the flavors could develop while turning inexpensive cuts into something extraordinary. Onions were essential, adding sweetness and depth to the tangy tomatoes. The result was a savory, satisfying dish perfect for ladling over mashed potatoes, rice, or even buttered noodles. Tomatoes, a key player in Swiss steak, were a practical choice. Canned tomatoes, first popularized in the early 1900s, made this dish accessible year-round. Who can resist the sight of those onions caramelizing in the skillet before being smothered in sauce? One could say Swiss steak is the Cinderella story of the food world. It starts tough, a little rough around the edges, but with a little care and time, it transforms into something utterly irresistible. Proof that sometimes slow and steady wins the race. Number 12. Leftover hash. Whatever meat sat in the refrigerator from last night's dinner got chopped into rough cubes with cold-boiled potatoes, diced onion, and a little bell pepper, then fried together in a cast-iron skillet with enough bacon grease to build a proper crust on the bottom. Hash was not a recipe, it was a strategy. Roast beef hash, corned beef hash, ham hash from the Sunday leftovers. The whole skill was in that golden brown layer on the bottom of the pan, and getting it right took patience and a stubborn refusal to stir too early. A fried egg cracked on top was optional but strongly encouraged. Families in the 1950s ate hash at least once a week, and nobody ever called it leftovers when the children asked what was for dinner. Number 12. Hoe cakes with sorghum. You whisked a cup of cornmeal, half a cup of buttermilk, a beaten egg, salt, and a tablespoon of bacon grease, and spooned it into hot cast iron in palm-sized rounds. The name comes from the iron blade of a garden hoe, which freed slaves and sharecroppers used as a griddle over an open fire when there was no proper pan in the cabin. The Cherokee taught it to the colonists. Black families in South Carolina made hoe cakes a quiet act of survival through the Jim Crow century. You eat them with sorghum poured straight on top. They cost pennies. They are, by every honest measure, ancestral food. The genius was the bacon grease in the batter itself. A tablespoon of rendered fat made the hoe cakes brown the way a real pancake brown does, and the salt from the cured pork seasoned the corn from the inside. Without the grease, the cakes were chalky. With it, they tasted like the breakfast stove. Number 13. Spam and rice. Hormel introduced Spam in 1937, and by the time the war ended, it had found a permanent home in American kitchens that had nothing to do with the military. You sliced it thick, fried it in a skillet until the edges caramelized, and laid it over a mound of white rice with a fried egg on top or a splash of soy sauce. In Hawaii and across the Pacific states, Spam and rice became a genuine cultural staple, but it was just as common in trailer parks and small apartments on the mainland where one can and a cup of dry rice fed 2 adults for under half $1. The sodium was enormous. Nobody cared. It was hot, filling, and a 12-ounce can sat in your cupboard for years without spoiling. That kind of reliability mattered when the paycheck was not. This creamy, savory casserole, ham tetrazzini with egg noodles, showcases how a few simple ingredients can be transformed into something truly special. While turkey tetrazzini is more commonly known, ham tetrazzini became a popular variation, especially for using up leftover holiday ham in a way that felt both indulgent and comforting. Named after Italian opera singer Luisa Tetrazzini, this dish originally featured chicken or turkey, often paired with a creamy sauce, mushrooms, and a variety of seasonings. The exact origin of ham tetrazzini is unclear, but the combination of a rich, buttery sauce and tender ham makes it a favorite for families seeking a hearty, filling meal. Egg noodles, thanks to their soft texture and ability to absorb sauces, are the perfect base for this casserole. When tossed with the ham and creamy sauce, they turn into a flavorful foundation that holds everything together. A sprinkle of Parmesan cheese on top before baking creates a golden, bubbly crust that takes the dish to another level. Stuffed pork chops are a comforting classic, stuffed to the brim with a savory blend and often served dripping in rich gravy. This dish found its place in the hearts of Americans in the mid-20th century, particularly loved in the Midwest and southern states. The preparation starts by cutting a pocket into pork chops, which are then filled with a stuffing made from breadcrumbs, onions, celery, and herbs. Once stuffed, the chops are browned until they sport a perfect golden crust, then baked to tender perfection. A favorite for family dinners and Sunday roasts, its hearty and filling nature made it a beloved meal. Stuffed pork chops are a testament to the versatility of pork, accommodating a variety of stuffings from apples to mushrooms, allowing everyone to tailor it to their taste. Before anyone called it a one-dish dinner, stuffed bell peppers already were one. The vegetable was the bowl, the protein was inside, and it came out of the oven complete. You blanched whole green peppers just enough to make them pliable, stood them upright in a baking dish, and filled each with ground beef browned with onion and garlic, folded with rice and tomatoes. Sauce over the top, 40 minutes at 350. The secret was the blanching. Skip it, and the pepper stayed raw and bitter at the center no matter how long it baked, and you learned that mistake exactly once. The dish appeared in 1970s dinner party menus and across millions of recipe boxes as a dependable weeknight anchor. It never fully disappeared from cookbooks, but it slipped from the weekly rotation when the extra time the blanching required stopped fitting. What replaced it wasn't better. It was just faster, and faster was enough. Number 18. Liver and onions. Beef liver sliced thin, dredged in seasoned flour, and pan-fried in bacon grease until the outside turned crisp and the inside stayed just barely pink. The onions went into the same pan, sliced into rings and cooked slow until they turned sweet and translucent. Served with mashed potatoes and a cold glass of whole milk, this showed up on tables across the country at least once a week during the 1960s. Mothers told their children it was good for the blood, which happened to be true. Most children hated it. Most adults pretended not to notice. But the combination of crispy liver and soft sweet onions was genuinely delicious if you gave it half a chance, and a whole generation grew up strong on a dinner they complained about every single time it appeared. Number 13. Poor man's meal of hot dogs and potatoes. You diced 4 potatoes, fried them in bacon grease until brown, threw in half a chopped onion, then sliced 4 hot dogs into coins for the last 6 minutes. Salt, pepper, a glug of ketchup on the side of the plate. That was supper in a coal camp in 1937, in a Bakersfield trailer in 1981, and in a kitchen in Ohio tonight. The dish has no recipe card. It is the working family's reflex meal, the one a man cooks when his wife is at the late shift. It costs about $3 to make today. It costs nothing to remember. Both are true at once. The order matters more than the recipe. Potatoes first, all the way to a deep brown crust, then the onion for sweetness, and the hot dogs only at the very end so the casing split and rendered their own fat into the pan. Meatier dinners were the best option in the 70s as bison steak became popular in Colorado. Bison was one of the most widely hunted animals in the state, with locals having a deep love for the meat. Steaks and American dinners complete each other, so it is no wonder that fresh bison steak with mashed potatoes and asparagus was a fan favorite. Long before Tuesday needed a theme, American chop suey was already solving the problem. Ground beef, elbow macaroni, canned tomatoes, onion, everything in one pan until the pasta absorbed the liquid. The name borrowed from Chinese cooking, chop suey, appeared in print as early as the late 1800s, derived from Cantonese for a little of this and that. But the dish had no connection to any Chinese kitchen. In New England, it was simply chop suey. In the Midwest, they called it American goulash. In Ohio, it became a baked casserole called Johnny Marzetti. You could tell where someone was raised by what they called it, and whether cheese went in at the end, and whether the green pepper was required or optional. Nobody agreed on any of it. Everybody's mother made the only correct version. The dish has never entirely gone, but the name has mostly faded. Most people under 30 call it pasta with meat sauce, unaware they're eating something that fed entire neighborhoods for most of a century. Lamb might seem like a fancy restaurant thing these days, but back in the day, it was a total dinnertime MVP. Lamb stew was a fan favorite at dinner parties back in the day, and I get the hype. Imagine the combination of melt-in-your-mouth lamb and an assortment of colorful vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and peas simmered in a rich, flavorful broth just begging to be soaked with some crusty bread. This is a dish that's guaranteed to warm you up from the inside out on a chilly day. Not to mention, it's surprisingly easy to make. Perfect for those nights when you want a delicious meal without spending hours in the kitchen. Just maybe don't tell your grandma you added a sprinkle of your favorite hot sauce. Some traditions are best left untouched. Number 24. Milk toast. This was the dinner you made when somebody was running a fever, or when the cupboard was almost bare, or when you simply did not have the energy to do anything else. 2 slices of bread, toasted just enough to hold their shape, laid flat in a shallow bowl. You heated milk on the stove with a pat of butter and a pinch of sugar, poured it warm over the toast, and ate it slowly with a spoon. In the 1940s and 1950s, milk toast was what mothers made for sick children and what widowed men ate alone at the kitchen table on quiet evenings. It cost almost nothing. It required almost nothing. And it was warm, and it was soft, and at the end of a long day, that was enough. Before I go further, for the folks who want meals like these all gathered in one place, I have put together the Vintage Recipe Guide, a collection of the recipes we keep coming back to on this channel, all at my website vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again in this video. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Steak Diane is an iconic dish featuring tender beefsteak smothered in a delectable cognac sauce, often flambéed right at your table for a touch of dining drama. Originating in mid-20th century America, This dish is named after the Roman goddess Diana. Its preparation includes pan-frying beef tenderloin and concocting a sauce from the pan juices, cognac, butter, mustard, and Worcestershire sauce. Adding a flambé enhances the rich flavors of the sauce dramatically. Steak Diane's allure was heightened by its theatrical preparation, often becoming the centerpiece of dining experiences in fine New York City restaurants such as the Drake and the Sherry Netherland, where celebrities frequently dined. Thought to have debuted in the 1950s in New York City, it quickly became a cornerstone of high-end dining. It was often served with mashed potatoes or vegetables, embodying the elegance of mid-century dining. Chicken and dumplings originated outside of Alabama, but found a very loving home in the state where it was popularly served. Chinese Americans' restaurants would serve the dish as an affordable dinner for people. In the 1970s, Alabama had dumpling joints that would specifically have chicken and dumplings as a bestseller. Number 15. Water pie. You whisked a cup and a half of water, a cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, 4 tablespoons of flour, and 4 pats of butter, then poured the lot into an unbaked shell. The first printed recipe ran in California in 1886, but the dish came back during the Depression when cooks had no eggs, no milk, and no excuse to skip dessert. The flour and the sugar set the water into a gelatinous custard in the oven, the butter floated to the top in beads of yellow, and the whole thing sliced clean once it cooled. Your great-grandmother served it at a wake in 1934 in West Virginia. Nobody knew it was made of water. They asked her for the recipe. She just smiled and lied. The chemistry is sugar binding water into syrup, then flour, gelating it into a sliceable solid past 200 degrees. You do not need to know any of that to bake one. You just need to trust the oven for 45 minutes and walk away. No dish says Sunday dinner like a pot roast simmering away, filling the house with the unmistakable aroma of comfort. Pot roast was an event, the centerpiece of countless family gatherings. Originating in France, pot au feu inspired what we now call pot roast, combining tougher cuts of beef with slow cooking to create something tender and flavorful. In America, the pot roast became a household favorite thanks to its practicality. Chuck roast, brisket, or round, these cuts weren't fancy, but with the magic of a Dutch oven or slow cooker, they transformed into melt-in-your-mouth perfection. Carrots, potatoes, and onions balanced the rich beef with earthy sweetness and hearty texture. The beauty of pot roast is its patience. It doesn't demand attention, just time. It's a dish that rewards you for slowing down, a rarity in today's grab-and-go world. As one home cook joked, it's the only dish that cooks itself while you're watching Sunday football. And we shall not forget the gravy, a pot roast's crowning glory. Thickened with pan drippings, it's the glue that holds this masterpiece together. If love had a flavor, pot roast might just be it. Chicken paprikash arrived through Hungarian immigration and held on for 60 years because it rewarded patience and real ingredients. Bone-in chicken, sweet Hungarian paprika, vivid, almost orange, with a faint sweetness impossible to replicate from the dusty supermarket tin. Butter, onion, sour cream, and nothing else that mattered. 2 heaping tablespoons of paprika into softened butter and onion, stirred until the kitchen changed, then the chicken, broth, lid on, 45 minutes low. The sour cream went in off the heat at the very end, always off the heat, because if it boiled, the sauce broke into something grainy with no recovery. Over wide egg noodles, the color of a late sunset. A taste of home recipe credits a grandmother named Alta, whose version used only 5 ingredients, trusting the paprika entirely. It held up. The dish has thinned from general awareness now, but anyone whose grandmother made it will stop mid-step when that specific smell moves through a room. Paprika bloomed in butter, sour cream finishing the pan, and be completely somewhere else for a moment. How can we talk about popular dinners and not discuss barbecue ribs in Kansas? The locals loved barbecue so much they created their own Kansas-style barbecue that entailed pork ribs grilled slowly in a spice rub. Pair that with a sweet but tangy sauce, and you have a knockout dinner that everyone would enjoy after a long day at work. Veal Parmigiana brings a little taste of Italian-American heritage to the table, featuring breaded veal cutlets smothered in tomato sauce and melted cheese. Born in the kitchens of Italian immigrant communities in the U.S., this dish was a clever adaptation of traditional Italian recipes, tailored to American tastes. It first surfaced in the early 20th century, with Italian-American families swapping out eggplant for veal. Introduced in Italian-American eateries soon after, veal parmigiana became a staple. The preparation? Bread those veal cutlets, fry them up, layer with marinara sauce, and a good helping of mozzarella or parmesan, then bake it until it's bubbling and golden. It hit its peak popularity in the 1950s and 1960s, often accompanied by pasta, crafting a hearty and satisfying meal. Number 29. Cornbread crumbled in a glass of buttermilk. A wedge of yesterday's skillet cornbread broken into a tall glass, cold buttermilk poured over the top, and a spoon. That is the whole meal. In the hill country of East Tennessee, a working farm widow named it her summer supper because the stove never had to come back on. The sour bite of the buttermilk and the sweet crumb of the bread made a balance that has no equivalent in any modern grocery store. The dish kept Appalachian families fed through August heat for 2 centuries. Ronnie Lundy gave it its own page in her cookbook on the foods of the Southern Mountains. It is dignified, fast, and costs less than a quarter when buttermilk is on sale. In medieval Europe, fish and root vegetables were the most common thing for a majority of the population. Most of them could not afford to sustainably get meat every single time they went out for grocery shopping. It was also something that was really preferred by religious followers of the church, although I can't really imagine a specific reason why. For root vegetables, I can see veganism being something a well-intending church appreciates, but then why the meat? If there are any history buffs in the comments, let us know. Now, the dish itself would change a lot. This would heavily depend on the kind of climate and geography you were working with. Coastal regions, like along the North Sea or the Baltic, for example, had a dense ecosystem of marine life. They had herring, whiting, haddock and cod, salmon or crabs, and people would often just work with whatever the catch of the day was. These fish would be salted and dried as much as they could, both for inland trade and for winter preservation. Root vegetables were also dearly important to people because they were one of the few kinds of vegetables that could withstand poor soils and still last through the winter. One of these vegetables was the iconic carrot. And here's an interesting fact. In medieval times, you actually had purple and yellow carrots instead of orange. Number 12. Macaroni and cheese with Velveeta. A box of elbow macaroni boiled, drained, and folded into a saucepan of cubed Velveeta, melted with whole milk and a knob of butter, finished under the broiler with buttered Ritz cracker crumbs on top. Kraft sold its boxed macaroni and cheese dinner for 19 cents in the 1960s, and that blue box was in roughly half of American pantries. The Velveeta version was the homemade upgrade. Mothers made it on payday or for company. The orange brick of processed cheese melted smooth, never broke, and tasted the way the 1960s tasted, which was salt and butter and a kind of optimism. It pulled the kids to the table without a single complaint. Velveeta is still on the shelf, but the homemade casserole has been pushed aside by the blue box and the freezer aisle. Your grandmother's version had a crust on top and a soft middle the blue box has never figured out how to copy. Chicken divan began as the signature dish of the Divan Parisian restaurant in New York City's Chatham Hotel, created by a chef named Anthony Lagasse in the early 20th century. Layered chicken and broccoli in a rich cream sauce served as the restaurant's centerpiece. By the late 1950s, home cooks had rebuilt it from what was on hand: frozen broccoli, leftover chicken, cream of chicken soup, mayonnaise, lemon juice, a teaspoon of curry powder, and cheddar across the top. The restaurant version called for a scratch bechamel. The home version needed a can opener and 30 minutes, and it tasted as though someone had genuinely tried. Frozen broccoli in one layer, cooked chicken over that, the soup and mayonnaise mixture poured over everything, cheddar on top, 350 until golden and bubbling. The curry powder is the thing most people skip, which is why their version never quite lands. She did not skip it. She knew what a single teaspoon did to a cream sauce, added it without measuring, and you never knew it was there until she was not making it anymore. Spam and eggs were the emergency dinner that never felt like one. Spam was the meat that came in a tiny rectangular can, and once you heard that suction sound as it slid out, you knew what was coming. You sliced it thick or thin, fried it in a pan until it crisped at the edges, and served it alongside scrambled eggs that may or may not have come from a powder. It was salty, greasy, and surprisingly good. If you grew up eating it, that is. Some people looked down on Spam, but when money was tight, Spam was a lifesaver. It had a long shelf life, required no refrigeration, and could be stretched across several meals. It showed up in casseroles, sandwiches, and stews, but next to eggs, it felt like breakfast for dinner, which somehow made everything okay. You would douse it in ketchup or hot sauce, whatever you had, and you would eat it at a small table with mismatched chairs and flickering lights and think, this could be worse, and it often was. Hoover stew got its name from President Herbert Hoover during the worst years of the Depression, given to it by the people who had to eat it. Pasta, canned tomatoes, sliced hot dogs, and corn dumped together into something that was less a recipe than a refusal to go hungry. Hoovervilles were the tent cities. Hoover blankets were the newspapers the homeless slept under. And Hoover stew was the cheapest possible meal made from the intersection of what was available and what was affordable. Dry elbow pasta, crushed tomatoes, sliced hot dogs, canned corn, and enough water to cook the pasta as it baked. Covered, $3.50, 40 minutes. The hot dogs stood in for beef nobody could buy. The pasta was the cheapest starch. The corn was the vegetable that survived. The people who ate this when they had no other choice are almost all gone, and the dish has gone nearly as quiet with them. What they made from almost nothing fed a generation through its worst years, and the least anyone can do is remember what it cost them. Number 10, creamed tuna and peas on toast. A can of tuna stirred into a white sauce of butter, flour, and milk, with a handful of frozen peas thrown in for color, ladled over 4 slices of buttered Wonder Bread toast on a plate. It was the dish a wife made when payday was 3 days away and the icebox held nothing else. It was also what kids got when they came home from school sick with a cold. Through the 1960s, creamed anything on toast was a working-class supper. By the time microwaves moved in, the creamed tuna had migrated to the freezer pouch as Stouffer's tuna noodle, and the peas had moved to the corner. The toast got thrown out altogether. The dish that was the bridge between paychecks for half of America became a thing nobody could quite remember the name of when you described it. Steamed clams, a beloved dish especially along the coasts of New England, have been enjoyed for generations. This dish is a true celebration of seafood, as fresh clams are steamed until tender, absorbing all the flavors of the broth, often seasoned with garlic, herbs, and a splash of white wine or broth. Clams, which are bivalve mollusks, have been a staple in coastal cuisine for centuries, with Native Americans harvesting them long before European settlers arrived. The joy of eating steamed clams comes from their delicate texture and briny sweetness. The perfect clam should pop open easily when steamed, a sign that it's cooked just right. Paired with a slice of hearty brown bread and a dollop of butter, this dish becomes a complete, satisfying meal. The richness of the butter and the rustic flavor of the brown bread perfectly complement the clam's natural saltiness, creating a balanced, indulgent experience. Steamed clams with brown bread, because sometimes the best meals are the ones that come with their own dipping sauce. The dish reflects the simplicity of coastal living, proving that the freshest ingredients often make the most memorable meals. Whether served as an appetizer or a main course, steamed clams with brown bread and butter remain a timeless favorite, offering a taste of the sea with every bite. Number 20. Brown beans with a slice of raw onion. The same pinto pot as number 22, but cooked plainer and served with a thick slice of white onion laid right on top of the beans. A small piece of cornbread on the side. Hill country families in McMinn County ate this 2 nights a week from October to April. The onion sweats into the broth and turns the whole bowl into something sharper than its parts. For one person, a coffee mug of beans and 1 slice of onion is a meal that a working hand could finish standing up. The leftover broth goes into a thermos for the next day's lunch, and nothing in the pot ever ends up in the chicken bucket. The dish is what a hill widow eats on the days when nothing else needs doing. Scalloped ham and potatoes, a classic dish that brings together two of the most beloved comfort foods, tender ham and creamy, cheesy potatoes. This casserole has been a staple at family gatherings and Sunday dinners for generations, proving that simple ingredients can create something extraordinary. The dish's origins can be traced back to the mid-19th century, where scalloped potatoes, sliced potatoes baked in a rich, creamy sauce, became a popular side. The addition of ham likely came later, as cooks sought to stretch their budget by incorporating leftover meats. The result was a filling, satisfying dish that combined the savory goodness of ham with the comforting texture of potatoes. Scalloped ham and potatoes became even more popular in the 20th century when convenience foods like canned soups and processed cheese made their way into American kitchens. The creamy sauce, often made from a blend of milk, butter, and cheese, is what binds the layers of ham and potatoes, creating a hearty casserole that's easy to make but feels like a special meal. Scalloped ham and potatoes is the ultimate use-it-all dish, because who doesn't love a meal where everything gets smothered in cheese? It's a dish that's perfect for feeding a crowd and always leaves everyone asking for seconds. Number 6. Salmon patties with cracker crumbs. A can of pink salmon, bones and skin and all, mashed in a bowl with 1 egg, a small chopped onion, and a sleeve of crushed saltines, formed into 4 patties, fried in 1/4 inch of vegetable oil until the edges turned crisp. 49 cents for the can, 12 cents for the crackers. The dish fed a family of 5 for under $1 through the 1960s. The bones got mashed in because they had calcium and Grandma said so. The patties came to the table with mashed potatoes and a tin of green peas warmed on the stove. By 1990, wild salmon had moved upmarket, the cans had shrunk, and the patties had retired. The recipe lived on for one more generation in the trailer parks and the small towns, then went quiet. Every once in a while you will find a woman in her 70s in a small grocery store buying a can of pink salmon and a sleeve of saltines, and you will know exactly what she is making for dinner. Dirty rice gets its name from the way chicken livers and gizzards color the grain. The rice goes in white and comes out speckled and brown and smelling of something deep you cannot get from plain broth alone. The Cajun and Creole tradition of making rice dirty dates to the 19th century in Louisiana, built from the offal that wealthier households discarded and resourceful ones transformed into a foundation flavor. The dump and bake version, raw, converted rice, diced celery, chicken pieces on top, broth with cayenne and garlic, and a few chicken livers chopped small and scattered through the rice before the foil went on. 325, covered, 90 minutes. The livers dissolved almost entirely into the grain, leaving only the flavor behind. Dark and unmistakable to anyone who grew up eating it this way. She always put the livers in, and nobody asked, and the dish was always better for what they could not identify. You only find out after she is gone when you try to make it, and it does not taste the same. Tomato custard casserole turned 2 everyday items, canned tomatoes and eggs, into a richly flavored dinner that captured the resourcefulness of the 1960s. The eggs were whisked with milk and a pinch of sugar before being poured over chopped tomatoes and breadcrumbs, then baked until the custard set and the top turned slightly caramelized. This casserole provided protein, vitamins, and comfort all in one dish without requiring expensive meats or elaborate preparation. Many families served it with buttered toast or a simple green salad, letting the natural acidity of the tomatoes balance the creamy custard. The recipe became a reliable weeknight option because it used inexpensive pantry staples that were always on hand. Its smooth texture and gentle sweetness made it appealing to children, while adults appreciated the subtle complexity that developed as the tomatoes baked. This unassuming casserole is a testament to how mid-century cooks could transform basic ingredients into something hearty, nourishing, and surprisingly elegant with little more than patience and a hot oven. Number 25. Killed lettuce over a hot-baked potato. A bowl of leaf lettuce, sliced green onions, and a little salt. Hot bacon grease with a splash of cider vinegar gets poured directly over the leaves, and they wilt down in seconds. The whole bowl tips onto a split-baked potato. 1 potato, 1 handful of lettuce, 2 strips of bacon broken in. The Foxfire books recorded this as a spring supper across the Blue Ridge and the Smokies, gathered from hill country grandmothers in Rabun County and Macon County in the early 70s. It is sharp, hot, and finished in the time it takes the potato to come out of the oven. A solo plate sets up in 5 minutes flat, and the lettuce can be from a kitchen window planter through most of the year. Before plant-based eating became trendy, hearty vegetarian dishes like this one were a practical necessity. Creamy wild rice and mushroom casserole was a staple in Midwestern and Northern kitchens, especially during the colder months. Packed with earthy flavors and a rich, velvety texture, it was a comforting dish that felt just as satisfying as any meat-based meal. Wild rice, despite its name, isn't actually rice. It's a highly nutritious aquatic grain native to North America. Indigenous tribes harvested it for centuries, and by the mid-20th century, it had found its way into everyday cooking. Though slightly more expensive than white rice, its nutty flavor and chewy texture made it worth the price. Combined with mushrooms, one of the most affordable and widely available vegetables, this dish was both economical and deeply flavorful. A creamy sauce, often made with milk, butter, and a touch of sherry, tied everything together, creating a casserole that was rich yet wholesome. As convenience foods surged in popularity, canned cream of anything soup replaced homemade sauces, and wild rice was increasingly swapped for cheaper, quicker-cooking grains. Over time, this once-loved casserole became a relic of an era when scratch cooking was the norm. Number 16. Pork chops and applesauce with shake and bake. 4 bone-in chops shaken in a paper bag of seasoned breadcrumbs and baked at 425 until the coating turned crisp. A jar of Mott's applesauce on the side, lukewarm, straight from the refrigerator. Shake and Bake hit shelves in 1965, and within 4 years, it was in roughly 1 in 3 American kitchens. The Brady Bunch made the line famous when Peter Brady said pork chops and applesauce in his Humphrey Bogart voice. The dish was Tuesday and Thursday food. It was simple. It was effective. By the 1990s, the box had moved to the bottom shelf. The chops thinned out. The applesauce got organic. Nobody under 40 knows the rhythm of shaking a bag, the small percussive sound it made. If you grew up in Texas, this dish required no occasion. It appeared in a 9x13 pan at every church supper and gathering from the 1960s onward. King Ranch chicken has a murky origin that the actual King Ranch in South Texas has always declined to claim. But by the time it spread through community cookbooks and church pamphlets across the state, it had become one of the defining one-dish meals of Texas home cooking. Torn corn tortillas go in a loose layer. Not stacked tight, they need room to absorb. Shredded chicken and a mixture of cream of chicken soup, cream of mushroom soup, Rotel diced tomatoes with green chilies, and sour cream go over that. Another tortilla layer, another filling layer, then cheddar and Monterey Jack across the top. 350, 45 minutes. The Rotel is the key. The green chili heat cutting through the sour cream and double soup, making the whole dish taste more deliberate than a collection of cans has any right to. Tomato soup with grilled cheese was the rainy day classic that never failed to make kids feel warm from the inside out. The moment a storm cloud rolled in, kids would start hoping their mothers would make this exact combo because nothing else matched the feeling of dipping a buttery sandwich into a bowl of steaming soup. The soup usually came straight from a can, cheap and dependable, mixed with water or milk to make it smoother. As it heated, the rich tomato smell filled the room, promising comfort before you even took the first bite. Meanwhile, the grilled cheese sizzled in a pan, the bread crisping in butter until it turned that perfect shade of golden brown. When the cheese melted completely, stretching in strings when you pulled the sandwich apart, you knew dinner was going to be perfect. Kids could barely wait for the soup to cool down before dipping the sandwich into it, soaking up all that warmth and flavor in one bite. It was simple, cheap, and so easy that mothers could make it even on their most exhausted days. But it never felt tired or ordinary. It felt like kindness in a bowl. It tasted like being taken care of. Kids begged for this meal because it felt like a warm hug, the food equivalent of being wrapped in a blanket while the world outside stayed cold and gray. It was childhood comfort at its absolute best. Number 28. Fried apples and a single pork chop. One thin bone-in chop, 2 firm tart apples cored and sliced into half moons, a spoon of bacon grease, and a pinch of dark brown sugar. The chop fries first in the heavy pan, comes out to rest on the plate, and the apples go into the same pan with the drippings still warm. 8 minutes. They soften, brown at the edges, and turn the color of an October hillside. The chop goes back beside them. A serving for one fits on a saucer. Joseph Dabney documented this exact pairing in his book on Appalachian foodways, and Ronnie Lundy called it the most honest pork dish in the mountains. The apples were usually limber twigs or wine saps from the back orchard, varieties most grocery stores stopped carrying after the 1970s. It tastes like a cool morning on a wood porch. Dandelion and bacon grease salad is an example of how Depression-era and 20th century foraging can actually lead to some really innovative recipes. This is something that's rooted in rural Midwestern culture, and this salad makes use of whatever is available in the wilds that day. One of the most common things you would ever find in these wilds was dandelion greens. They grew wild in all kinds of environments, roadsides, fields, and yards, and they were a really prized thing for the people. Most folks believed it was a natural remedy for a lot of things because it was believed to help with things like indigestion, inflammation, and strengthening your immune system. In subsistence farming areas and coal country, it was very common for families to teach their kids how to forage dandelion greens. Remember how I told you about the way bacon grease is used in a lot of these dishes? Yeah, so after frying the bacon, a small amount of bacon grease would be preserved and it would be used to flavor any kind of bland or plain dish like beans and cornbread and give it a bit of a savory edge. The rendered fat was really helpful to people because it also meant they didn't exactly need that much oil. Number 11. Sunday fried chicken in a Crisco can. A whole fryer cut into 8 pieces, soaked in buttermilk overnight, dredged in flour seasoned with salt, pepper, and paprika, then dropped piece by piece into a cast iron skillet of melted Crisco hot enough to make the flour hiss. Lid on, 10 minutes aside. The fat got strained back into the can after it cooled and used again the next Sunday. Through the 1960s, fried chicken was the meal that pulled the family back to the table after church. The whole bird cost about 39 cents a pound at the supermarket. Then Colonel Sanders opened 1,000 stores and the bucket replaced the skillet. The Crisco can in the back of the cabinet went rancid and got thrown out. A generation forgot what real Sunday chicken sounded like in a hot pan. You can still buy a can of Crisco. Almost nobody fries a bird in it anymore. Red beans and rice on Monday was not a recipe in New Orleans, it was a calendar fact. Monday was wash day, requiring hours of labor, so Monday dinner had to take care of itself. Beans into the pot in the morning, smoked sausage added by noon, rice going in late, everything collapsing into a thick sauce with very little oversight. The oven version carries the same logic. Soaked dried kidney beans, sliced smoked sausage, long grain rice, and spiced chicken broth, cayenne, garlic powder, a bay leaf, covered at 325 for 2 hours. The sausage bleeds smoke into the broth, the rice absorbs from below, and the beans thicken the liquid until what started as separate components becomes something close to gumbo. The Monday red beans tradition is documented to the mid-19th century in New Orleans and was common throughout Gulf Coast African-American households where smoked pork and dried legumes were the most affordable proteins available year-round. The dish does not need watching. It just needs time. Corncob jelly was one of the most surprising Depression-era creations, turning what was usually discarded into something sweet and useful. After eating or cutting kernels from corn, families would boil the stripped cobs for a long time until the liquid turned golden. With sugar and sometimes pectin, this liquid became a jelly that spread easily on bread or biscuits. It had a mild corn flavor, slightly sweet, and it gave people a way to stretch ingredients without buying fruit for jams. Since sugar was often rationed or expensive, this jelly was seen as a clever way to create a sweet treat out of nothing more than scraps. Many families remembered it fondly, not only because it was thrifty, but because it represented resourcefulness at its finest. Children often spread it on cornbread or stale bread softened in milk, turning waste into dessert. It may seem odd today, but back then it was pure ingenuity. Number 27. Soup beans and skillet cornbread. A cup of dry pinto beans soaked overnight, then simmered all day with a chunk of smoked ham hock, an onion, and water that just covers them. By supper time, the broth has thickened on its own and turned the color of a strong tea. A wedge of cornbread crumbled in is the only addition. The dish scales down without effort. 1 cup of dry beans yields 4 single suppers, and the pot reheats better on the second day than the first. Sydney Saylor Farr put it at the center of her 1983 book on mountain cooking, and Loyal Jones wrote that the smell of the pot was what a hill country grandmother smelled like on a Saturday evening. For a senior eating alone in a hill country kitchen, no other dinner returns this much warmth for so few coins. Rye pancakes are a fantastic option to go for if you have a family of 4 and live in prehistoric times. They were one of the most common recipes, despite what you might be thinking. These people were still walking around wearing chainmail armor and robes, so how'd they end up having pancakes? Well, they're actually pretty different from the kinds of pancakes we're used to today. These are just rye flour, water, some salt, and that's it. It makes a batter that can be ladled, but most people would typically just pour it onto a griddle or a hot stone suspended over a hearth. This was the most common way to cook desserts or breakfast in these times. If you were lucky enough to have milk or buttermilk, you could replace the water with that, and it would usually make them a bit more tender. People typically fried these in butter or animal fat. Well, if it wasn't a fasting day. Rye usually does not need to be flavored much, but what flavorings people did use, they were very different from what we have today. People used stewed vegetables, onions and garlic instead of Miracle Whip, rainbow sprinkles, and maple syrup. Number 21. Chicken a la king in pastry shells. Diced cooked chicken folded into a sherry cream sauce with mushrooms, pimientos, and green peas, ladled into a Pepperidge Farm puff pastry shell that you pulled out of the freezer that morning. It was the dish a hostess made when the boss came over. It was also what showed up at every wedding reception, club dinner, and junior league luncheon between 1955 and 1969. The writer Calvin Trillin once wondered in print where it had gone, because for 2 decades it was everywhere. Convenience killed it. By the 1980s, the pastry shells were hard to find and the sherry felt fussy. The recipe sits in 70-year-old binders, splashed and yellowed, waiting for a hostess who is not coming back. You will not find it on a restaurant menu in any major city. You will find it tucked inside a church cookbook from Indianapolis printed in 1968. Bratwurst links, apple slices, and boxed stuffing in one covered baking dish. It sounds like someone emptied the refrigerator in October and called it dinner, which is almost exactly what happened. The dish belongs to the German-American tradition of pairing pork with fruit, a combination that ran through Midwestern households with German and Scandinavian roots from the 19th century onward. Bratwurst went in raw, nestled into dry stuffing mix with apple slices tucked around them, and enough chicken broth poured over the stuffing to hydrate it as it baked. Foil over the dish, 350, an hour. The apples softened to nearly sauce around the sausages. The stuffing absorbed the sausage fat and apple juice until it was dense and fragrant, and the bratwurst browned where the liquid did not reach. Her version went into the oven every October without fail. When October came the year after she was gone, the apple tree still had apples and nobody knew what to do with them. Cane syrup ginger cookies were the winter sweets born from necessity, shaped by families who could not afford refined sugar but still wanted something warm and comforting. Cane syrup was cheaper, accessible, and kept well through the cold months, making it a trusted companion in countless kitchens. Grandma mixed it with flour, fat, and ground ginger, creating a soft dough that smelled like holiday spice even on ordinary afternoons. When the cookies baked, they spread into soft, chewy circles with edges that crisped just enough to snap gently under your teeth. The flavor was deep, warm, and earthy, the kind of sweetness that lingered rather than shouted. Families cherished these cookies because they brought joy without requiring ingredients that winter budgets could not handle. They tasted like generosity in lean times, A reminder that sweetness did not need to be extravagant to matter, cane syrup ginger cookies were humble but powerful, a dessert that made cold days feel kinder. Duck à l'orange is a venerable French dish that pairs roasted duck breast with a vibrant, tangy orange sauce. Its rich history dates back to the 19th century, enjoying popularity among French aristocrats. The duck is typically roasted to achieve a crispy exterior, while the sauce is crafted from a reduction of orange juice, stock, and a hint of Grand Marnier or Cointreau. By the 1970s, this dish had become a hallmark of sophisticated dining, frequently chosen for elegant dinner parties or upscale restaurants. The delightful contrast between the rich, savory duck and the fresh, citrusy sauce creates an unforgettable flavor profile that showcases the dish's aristocratic French origins. The meticulous preparation and exquisite presentation make duck à l'orange a true culinary masterpiece. Swiss steak had nothing to do with Switzerland. The name came from the tenderizing technique, Swissing borrowed from the textile process for flattening fabric, where you hammered a round steak with a mallet until the muscle fibers relented, dredged in flour, browned hard in a Dutch oven, then buried under canned tomatoes, sliced onion, bell peppers, and Worcestershire. Lid on at 325. 2.5 hours undisturbed. What came out was pull-apart, tender inside dark tomato gravy so thick it clung to a fork. Reynolds Wrap promoted the recipe on the back of their foil boxes starting in the late 1940s, a specific marketing push that spread it into millions of kitchens that might never have found it. And Swiss steak held a place on American tables for 3 more decades before the convenience food era quietly made slow braising seem like too much to ask on a weeknight. Recipes first appeared in American cookbooks around 1911. For 60 years, nobody needed to explain what it was or why the waiting was worth it. That explanation is now required. Cheesy broccoli and rice casserole is a dish that may just be the ultimate comfort food. It's the kind of meal that fills the house with an irresistible aroma, combining the earthiness of broccoli, the warmth of rice, and the creamy richness of cheese. Its popularity skyrocketed in the 1960s, when casseroles became a go-to for busy families looking for easy, satisfying meals. The origin of this casserole can be traced back to the post-war era when convenience foods, like canned soups and processed cheeses, took center stage. The combination of broccoli and rice, often bound together with a can of creamy mushroom soup, was an affordable and filling way to stretch ingredients. Over time, home cooks started adding their own twists, incorporating cheddar cheese, garlic, and even a crunchy breadcrumb topping for texture. While it's easy to dismiss cheesy broccoli and rice casserole as just another side dish, it's also the type of meal that can easily steal the spotlight at dinner. It's a versatile dish, whether served alongside a roast chicken or as the main event for a meatless dinner. Cheesy broccoli and rice casserole is the ultimate kitchen hack. Tastes gourmet, takes no time, and leaves everyone smiling. It's the kind of dish that proves simplicity can be deliciously satisfying. Number 25. Fried bologna sandwiches. Thick-cut bologna from the deli counter, scored along the edges so it would not curl, dropped into a hot skillet with a pat of margarine, and fried until both sides turned brown and crispy around the slits. White bread, a smear of yellow mustard, maybe a slice of American cheese if it happened to be payday week. In the 1960s, a package of Oscar Mayer bologna ran about 40 cents, and it fed a family of 5 for 2 straight nights. Kids in mill towns from Pittsburgh to Birmingham grew up eating this 3 times a week and asking for more. It was never a last resort. It was the meal you actually wanted when you got home from school and the kitchen smelled like hot grease and bread. Number 22. Mock apple pie from Ritz crackers. You broke up 36 Ritz crackers into a pie shell, poured a sugar syrup of water, sugar, lemon juice, and cream of tartar over the top, dusted it with cinnamon, and baked it for 30 minutes. What came out tasted enough like apple pie that grown men asked for seconds. Ritz hit shelves on November 21, 1934, at 19 cents a pound, and within 3 years they were the best-selling cracker in the world. Apples were expensive, crackers were cheap. The cream of tartar mimicked apple's tart bite, and the lemon did the rest. By the Second World War, Nabisco was printing the recipe on every blue cracker box. Your grandmother served it at church suppers. Nobody guessed, but you could only pull it off if you served it warm. Cold mock apple pie tasted like a soggy cracker, and that was the rule every Depression-era hostess passed down without writing it on the recipe card. Number 17. Bean soup with a ham bone. After the Sunday ham, the bone went straight into a pot of water with a bag of dried navy beans, a diced onion, a couple of carrots, and a bay leaf. You let it simmer on the back burner for most of the next day, adding water whenever it got too thick until the beans went creamy and the ham fell off the bone in soft shreds. That one ham bone produced 3 or 4 nights of soup for a family of 5 without a single trip to the store. The broth was smoky and rich, the beans were soft enough to dissolve on your tongue, and the little bits of ham scattered through every bowl gave each spoonful something to find. It tasted better on the second night, because the flavors kept deepening as it sat. Chicken fried steak. This classic is long gone but never forgotten. This one's pretty easy to make too. All you need is a chicken steak dredged in a seasoned flour mixture, dipped in a wet batter, and finally coated in a crispy breading. Fry till it's golden brown for the perfect dinner that'll leave you wanting more. Chicken fried steak is typically served with a creamy gravy for dipping, along with mashed potatoes and vegetables for a complete and oh-so-satisfying meal. It is basically American, and the yassified version of the Austrian dish Wiener Schnitzel, and the Italian dish cotoletta alla Milanese. Fancy names, but the same old fried chicken steak. Now I know what you're thinking. Why did this crispy golden goodness leave us too soon? Well, you can trick yourself all you want, but it's not the healthiest dinner out there. But hey, having a fried steak once in a while can't do much harm, right? Just be prepared for some finger-licking good action. This dish is messy, but in the best way possible. Number 30. Hoe cake with red-eye gravy. A piece of country ham about the size of a small saucer goes into a hot iron pan. 2 minutes aside is plenty, and the brown bits stuck to the iron are the whole point of the supper. A splash of black coffee deglazes the pan, and that thin red gravy is what gave the dish its name. The hoe cake is just yellow cornmeal, salt, and boiling water patted into a flat round and fried in the leftover ham grease until the edges turn the color of a copper penny. 1 ham slice, 1 hoe cake, 1 plate. That was supper in Madison County, North Carolina, on a Tuesday in November, and the woman eating it did not feel poor. She felt fed. The dish has lived in the mountain repertoire since the early 1800s, and a single portion costs about $1.50 at any country butcher. Baked turnips with herbs is an example of how even a simple and humble root vegetable can be turned into something that gets your kids at the table if you know what you're doing. Luckily, medieval-era cooks had a lot of room for trial and error, and they definitely learned a few things about working with turnips. While baking them was never as common as stewing or boiling them, it was extremely good. Households that had the privilege of a bake oven would abuse that luxury maliciously, in fact. That's just how nice it was. In households where that wasn't a thing, Tay turnips were typically wrapped in kale or cabbage leaves and then baked in ashes or at the edges of a hearth. This was a pretty rustic method, but it would help to soften the turnip, and it let the herbs introduce some much-needed flavor. Of course, you had to be very careful that what you were doing wasn't going to burn the turnips. Monasteries were most commonly known for preparing turnips, and they relied pretty much entirely on olive oil and butter. This resulting dish was something that was really earthy and savory, but the herbs helped when it came to the taste of turnips. For some, that taste can be really overwhelming. Number 21. Cat head biscuit with sorghum. A biscuit the size of a cat's head, made from self-rising flour, lard, and buttermilk, baked at 450 until the top is the color of a deer hide. Split it open while it is still hot enough to burn a thumb. A spoon of dark sorghum molasses goes inside, and the molasses melts into the crumb and runs down a finger. Loyal Jones wrote that in the southern mountains, the cathead biscuit with sorghum was supper for any man or woman alone in the house, and Joseph Dabney recorded the same dish across the smokehouse counties of East Tennessee. The recipe makes 4 biscuits at a time, 3 for now, 1 for breakfast. A jar of dark Tennessee sorghum lasts a single person an entire winter. The sweetness is mineral and almost bitter at the back of the tongue, nothing like store syrup, and a single biscuit fills the plate without crowding it. Number 13. Pot roast with Lipton onion soup mix. A 4-pound chuck roast browned in a Dutch oven, topped with a packet of Lipton dehydrated onion soup mix, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom, and a splash of beef broth, then braised in a 325 oven for 3 hours. Carrots and potatoes piled around it for the last hour. Lipton printed the recipe on the back of every box from the early 1960s on, and Sunday dinner from Bangor to Bakersfield smelled the same because of it. Drive through a small town in Iowa at 4 on a Sunday and you would smell chuck roast through every screen door. The roast came out of the oven at 5. The family ate at 6. And the leftovers became hash on Tuesday. By the late 1990s, busy parents had switched to crockpots and roasted chickens. The Sunday roast moved to the Yankee Candle aisle as a scent. You can still buy the Lipton packet at any grocery store in the country. The packet outlived the Sunday it was meant for. Hot grits with bacon drippings were the winter breakfast that kept families warm long before the sun climbed up over the rooftops. Grits were cheap, filling, and dependable, which made them perfect for cold seasons when the body needed something hearty to face the day. Grandma saved every spoonful of drippings from the skillet, pouring them into a jar she kept near the stove like it was treasure. When the water boiled and the grits began to thicken, she added a little scoop of those drippings, stirring slowly until the pot turned creamy and rich. The smell alone was enough to pull children from warm beds. This breakfast did not need anything fancy. The flavor came from the memory of yesterday's meal and the promise of today's strength. It tasted like warmth you could hold in your hands, the kind that spread through your chest and made winter mornings feel possible. This was not restaurant food. This was real food made by people who understood how to stretch flavor across days. Hot grits with bacon drippings tasted like comfort, resourcefulness, and the quiet determination to start the day with something good. Cheesy chicken and hash brown casserole arrived when the freezer section became a pantry. Frozen, shredded hash browns, the bag in the bottom of the freezer since the last big breakfast, were the entire starch, tumbled into a dish still partly frozen, then covered with shredded rotisserie chicken, sour cream, cream of chicken soup, shredded cheddar, and salt. No pre-cooking, no thawing, no browning. $3.50 for an hour. The hash browns cooked in steam from the sour cream and soup. The chicken absorbed the potato fat, and the cheddar went crispy at the edges. Through the 1970s, as frozen foods became standard pantry items, this assembly cooking replaced the labor of peeling and slicing that earlier potato casseroles required. She probably learned it from a church cookbook or the back of the Ore-Ida bag, and once she did, she never went back to fresh potatoes. That version, the easy one done in 10 minutes flat, is the one you remember, and she is not here to make it anymore. Number 17. Glazed ham loaf with pineapple. A 2-pound loaf made from ground cured ham mixed with ground pork, bound with breadcrumbs and an egg, baked in a ring mold, crowned with Dole pineapple rings and brown sugar that caramelized in the last 20 minutes. Pennsylvania Dutch country invented it. Church suppers from York to Lancaster served it on long tables every other Sunday. Through the 1960s, butchers ground their ham trimmings into loaves wrapped in white paper and labeled by hand for housewives to take home for about $1 a pound. By 1985, most butcher counters had been replaced by plastic-wrapped meat in the cold case. The ham loaf went with them. The pineapple ring still shows up on the occasional Easter ham, but it is a ghost of a ghost. You will not find a butcher who grinds his own ham loaf mix in any chain grocery store today. Chicken cordon bleu is a sumptuous dish composed of breaded chicken breasts stuffed with ham and cheese. Its name, cordon bleu, which translates to blue ribbon from French, hints at its esteemed origins. Thought to have started in Switzerland around the mid-20th century, it soon won over American palates. The method involves flattening chicken breasts, layering them with ham and Swiss cheese, rolling them up, covering them in breadcrumbs, and then frying or baking them until they're beautifully golden. The popularity of chicken cordon bleu in the United States was significantly driven by the rise of gourmet frozen meals in the 1970s, where it became a favorite for its ability to retain taste and texture even after freezing and reheating. Often featured at formal dinners or during special occasions in the 60s and 70s, it was prized for its crisp outer shell encasing a lusciously gooey and savory center. Nobody called it a recipe. There was ground beef and potatoes in the bin, and that was the plan. The beef browned with diced onion, broken up but left with some texture. Some fat stayed in the pan deliberately. Flour stirred through until it disappeared, then beef broth poured slowly, pulling up everything the beef had left behind on the bottom. 3 minutes over medium heat, and it thickened into something dark, glossy, and full of depth that no gravy packet ever replicated because the flavor was in the fond, the browned bits, and you only got those by starting with the meat itself. Over hand-mashed potatoes, salt, and butter, nothing else. 20 minutes total. The house smelled like someone was paying attention. She never named what she did between the browning and the broth. You figured it out years later, alone in your own kitchen, the moment the gravy hit the right color and sheen, and felt something that was difficult to name, but that had her in it. Okay, creamed spinach and pearl onions didn't look the most appetizing, but trust me, it was always a hit at family dinners. Think of a rich, creamy base packed with vibrant green spinach leaves. And let's not forget the star of the show, pearl onions, that added the perfect touch of sweetness. Not only was this dinner finger-licking delicious, but it was healthy too. Jam-packed with nutrients including vitamins A, C, and K, iron, folate, potassium, and a good amount of fiber. Just don't blame me if you get flashbacks to your school cafeteria. But hey, sometimes those cafeteria classics deserve a second chance, especially when they're this delicious and healthy all at the same time. Number 20. Oxtail soup. Butchers used to practically give oxtails away because nobody with money wanted them. A couple pounds of oxtails, a few carrots, celery, an onion, and enough water to fill a stock pot. You simmered it for 3 or 4 hours until the meat slid off the bone and the broth turned dark and gelatinous from the collagen. No thickener needed. A bowl of oxtail soup on a January night in 1958 was one of the most satisfying dinners a family could eat, and the whole pot cost less than $1. Today, oxtails sell for $8 or $9 a pound at most grocery stores. The dinner that poor families made because they could not afford anything better became too expensive for those same families to make. Number 24. Depression spaghetti. You opened a bottle of ketchup and you opened a box of pasta, and that was the entire grocery list. The home cooks of the 1930s figured out that sugar, vinegar, and tomato puree were the 3 things that made marinara taste like marinara, and ketchup already had all 3. You boiled the noodles, drained them, stirred in half a bottle of ketchup, and you had a plate that looked like Italian food on a budget that did not. A Japanese chef in 1945 watched American GIs eat C-ration spaghetti and invented Napolitan, still on Tokyo menus today. Down in Haiti, they make breakfast spaghetti with ketchup, sausage, and pepper. One cheap idea, 3 countries, all feeding workers. The bare-bones version fed millions across 2 decades. Number 24. Hot water cornbread, cornmeal, and a pinch of salt in a tin bowl, boiling water poured over, stirred until it just holds together as a thick paste. Patted into 3 small cakes and fried in hot bacon grease until the edges are lace. Kratos Williams, the Appalachian scholar from Watauga County, wrote that hot water cornbread was the first supper a child learned to make, and the last one an old widow stopped making. There is no egg, no buttermilk, no leavening, and the recipe survived 2 centuries of mountain winters because it works with whatever is left in the cornmeal sack. 3 cakes feed 1 person well, with 2 left over for breakfast, cold and crumbled into coffee. The dish has lived in the mountains since before the railroads came, and it has not changed its shape since. Mock fried chicken steak is a really interesting one because this actually makes use of so many things in creative ways to mimic the texture, taste, and overall feeling of fried chicken steak. Traditionally, the recipe calls for cheap cuts of meat, but in the Great Depression, people were even running with non-meat ingredients thanks to World War II rationing, which really put a massive hole in America's overall meat supply. In the 50s, too, home cooks brought this recipe back when they really needed to stretch a small amount of protein or use government food. So if you make this dish with ground meat or beef pork and shape it into a patty, mix it with breadcrumbs and cracker crumbs, and then douse it in seasoned flour or cracker crumbs again, then pan fry it, you get a pretty decent imitation of chicken fried steak. You just have to be really careful with what kind of seasonings you use, because it's also true that the kind of seasoning you go with decides how good of an imitation of a chicken fried steak this is. The most interesting part is probably the flour-based version, which was straight out of the Depression. People would make a fritter using flour, milk, and eggs to make something that resembled a steak, and this was seasoned and fried. There was no meat, but it was meant to imitate the breading, flour-y taste of the meal anyway. In all cases, it was a comfort meat, and a chunk of that comfort was that it kept your wallet in good health. Number 25. Tomato aspic salad. A ring of tomato juice, gelatin, and finely chopped celery, unmolded onto an iceberg leaf with a dollop of Hellmann's mayonnaise dropped in the center. Hostesses called it a salad because it was cold and it jiggled. It first appeared on suburban dinner tables in the late 1950s and held its place through the early 1960s as the marker that a housewife could afford a refrigerator and the time it took to chill 3 layers. Imagine a copper ring mold sweating in a Frigidaire next to a glass dish of deviled eggs. The Jell-O brand even sold a seasoned tomato flavor in the 1960s, packaged for exactly this dish at 23 cents a box. By 1968, Better Homes started running fewer molded salads and more crisp greens, and the aspic ring slid quietly out of the dinner party rotation. Today, nobody under 60 has tasted one. The dish belongs to the era when sophistication was measured by how cleanly something slid out of a copper mold. By the time the 1980s arrived, the old casserole logic had new ingredients to work with. Ground turkey had just become widely available, and backyard gardens that always produced more zucchini than anyone could eat in August now had a new place to send the surplus. Sliced zucchini goes in first, then raw ground turkey crumbled over it, then canned diced tomatoes drained lightly, then shredded mozzarella across the surface. No broth needed. The zucchini releases enough water as it bakes to steam everything above it. The turkey cooks in that steam, and the mozzarella melts into the tomatoes and pools at the edges. What most people spent August trying to get rid of became the entire liquid base of a casserole that fed a household for $3. That transformation, zucchini from garden pest to load-bearing kitchen staple, is what made this dish worth keeping once budgets got tight again. Peanut butter on crackers provided complete protein and staying power without requiring a single pot or pan. Seniors living on fixed incomes during the 1960s and 70s kept jars of peanut butter in their pantries as insurance against hunger. Saltines, graham crackers, or Ritz crackers served as the canvas for this thick, sticky spread that required some effort to eat, but rewarded patience with satisfaction. The peanut butter could be spread thin for economy, or thick for indulgence depending on the day's mood and the jar's remaining contents. Some seniors drizzled honey over their peanut butter crackers, or added sliced banana when fruit was available. The combination of fat, protein, and carbohydrate kept blood sugar stable through long evenings. This meal required no cooking, no cleanup beyond a knife wiped clean, and no particular skill. Peanut butter on crackers represented pure practicality, transformed into genuine sustenance for people who understood that simple did not mean inadequate. Evaporated and powdered milk were the quiet heroes of the poor man's pantry, the kind that didn't look like much but made all the difference. When fresh milk was too expensive or too far to fetch, these tins stepped in. Powdered milk mixed with water could be used for baking, breakfast, and even feeding babies when nothing else was around. Evaporated milk had that thick, sweet flavor that made coffee richer and pies creamier. It was comfort in a can. People learned to trust it because it never spoiled and could sit on a shelf for months. During lean winters, that security meant everything. You'd see families mix a little milk powder with oats, stretch it into gravy, or stir it into mashed potatoes. It might not have been the farm fresh kind, but it carried the same warmth. For many, those tins meant nourishment and dignity in a time when both were scarce. Nobody outside the South knew what poppy seed chicken was, and that was part of how you knew you were in the right kitchen. Cooked chicken, shredded, never cubed, went into a baking dish, then a mixture of sour cream and cream of chicken soup poured over it, smooth and thick. Over the top went a full sleeve of crushed Ritz crackers mixed with melted butter and a tablespoon of poppy seeds pressed lightly into the cracker surface, baked until the crust went deep gold and the cream filling was bubbling at the edges. The poppy seeds are not for flavor. They are for texture and identity, and anyone who skips them has never made this the right way. The recipe circulated through Southern church suppers and community cookbooks throughout the 1960s, passed hand to hand without a printed name. She made it every time someone in the congregation was sick or grieving or had a new baby. You ate it at her table and never thought to write it down, and when she stopped bringing it, nobody could remember what had gone into it. Number 5. Tongue with horseradish sauce. A whole beef tongue, 3 pounds, simmered for 3 hours with bay leaves, peppercorns, and a halved onion until a knife slid through it. Peeled while warm, sliced thin against the grain, served cold on a platter with a tart horseradish cream. Pickle on the side. Through the 1960s, tongue was a Saturday lunch in Jewish delicatessens from the Bronx to Boyle Heights, and a Sunday cold cut in many German and Polish American homes. The butcher kept 3 or 4 tongues in the back case. By the 1980s, most butchers stopped carrying it because the demand was gone. The grandchildren of the people who loved it would not eat it. The horseradish stayed. The tongue did not. You will pay $26 a pound today for what used to cost 90 cents at a corner butcher shop. Fish sticks, those crispy, golden-breaded delights, have been a fixture of American family dinners since the mid-20th century. While their origins date back to the early 1950s, when commercial frozen food production boomed, fish sticks quickly became a go-to for busy families. Made from white fish, typically cod or pollock, these little rectangular pieces of seafood are battered and deep-fried to perfection, making them as crunchy on the outside as they are tender on the inside. The classic pairing of fish sticks with tartar sauce elevates the meal. Tartar sauce, a tangy combination of mayonnaise, pickles, and lemon juice, adds a creamy contrast to the crispy fish. While the sauce has its roots in French cuisine, it became a beloved accompaniment to fish and chips, and later to fish sticks in the U.S. On the side, coleslaw, a salad made from finely shredded raw cabbage, carrots, and a tangy dressing, has been a popular addition to fish dishes for generations. Its crisp texture and slightly sweet flavor balance out the richness of the fish and tartar sauce. Number 17. Ramps and scrambled eggs. Ramps are the wild leeks that come up in the holler hardwood every March, and they have a smell that lingers on a kitchen for 2 days. A half-dozen ramps chopped fine, sweated in bacon grease for 2 minutes, then 2 beaten eggs scrambled in slow until they just set. A piece of buttered toast underneath. The supper takes 4 minutes, and the ramps are free for anyone who knows where to find them. Hill families in Madison County and across the Smokies built the spring around this meal, and the annual ramp festivals in Cosby and White Top still draw families that have gathered the same patches for 4 generations. For one plate, a half handful of ramps is plenty, and the smell tells the neighbors what was for supper without anyone having to say. Number 21. Hamburger gravy on toast. You browned half a pound of ground beef in cast iron, sprinkled 3 tablespoons of flour into the grease, stirred a minute, then poured in 2 cups of milk and thickened it. You poured the gray, peppery gravy over toast. 30 cents fed 4 in 1962. The Navy called it SOS for short, which stood for 2 words your grandmother would not say out loud. The dish first appeared in the 1910 Manual for Army Cooks and fed soldiers from World War I through Vietnam. The trick is, the flour cooks in the beef fat for a full minute before the milk goes in. That kills the raw taste. Your father did it without thinking. What most people miss is that the bread mattered as much as the gravy. White toast was wrong. You wanted Wonder Bread 3 days stale because the dry crumbs soaked the gravy without going to mush. Number 20. Tuna noodle casserole. You opened a can of chicken of the sea, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, boiled egg noodles, mixed it with a cup of milk, topped it with crushed potato chips, and broiled it 10 minutes. The first printed recipe came out of Sunset magazine in 1930 from a Kennewick, Washington woman named only as Mrs. W.F.S. Campbell's introduced cream of mushroom soup in 1934, and that one product is the reason your grandmother made this every Thursday for 31 years. By 1959, 8 out of 10 households served canned tuna weekly, with this casserole in the top 3 uses. It fed a working family of 5 for less than $1. It still does. Your aunt is still making it. The genius detail was the potato chip crust on top, which turned to glass under the broiler and shattered when you ran the spoon through the dish. The crunch is what your cousins remembered, not the tuna, the chips. Number 11. Biscuits and sausage gravy. Homemade biscuits, the real kind made with white lily flour and cold lard, cut out with an upside-down drinking glass because nobody in the house owned an actual biscuit cutter. While they baked, you browned a roll of Jimmy Dean pork sausage in a cast-iron skillet, crumbled it fine, and sprinkled flour right over the cooked meat without draining a drop of grease. You stirred until the flour soaked into the fat, then poured whole milk in slowly while scraping the bottom of the pan, and a thick white gravy formed with little bits of browned sausage suspended throughout. Split the hot biscuits open on the plate and drown them. This was breakfast food turned into supper, and nobody in Eastern Tennessee saw a single thing wrong with that. A tube of sausage and a batch of biscuits fed a whole family for less than what a drive-through combo meal costs today, and the gravy was the part that mattered. It turned 3 biscuits into a full dinner that tasted like somebody's kitchen on a cold Saturday morning. Chicken divan is all about comfort, featuring chicken and broccoli smothered in a creamy cheese sauce, baked to perfection. It originated in the early 20th century at the Divan Parisien restaurant in New York City, named for the very place that concocted it. Initially designed as a showcase of the chef's skills in French cooking, chicken divan made its mark in the mid-20th century as a dish that blended sophistication with simplicity. To make it, layer cooked chicken and broccoli in a baking dish, pour over a sauce made from butter, flour, cream, and cheese, and bake until it's golden and bubbly. This dish is a testament to the fusion of French culinary art with the comfort of American home cooking, creating a truly delightful dish. Soft-boiled eggs with toast soldiers turned a simple egg into an interactive meal that brought small pleasure to solitary dining. Seniors who grew up with this British-influenced tradition continued preparing it well into later years, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. The egg was lowered gently into boiling water and cooked for exactly 3 to 4 minutes, producing set white and gloriously runny yolk. Meanwhile, toast was prepared and cut into narrow strips called soldiers, ready for dipping. The egg sat in a small cup, its top carefully removed to reveal golden liquid within. Each toast soldier was dipped into the yolk, emerging coated in rich goodness that made plain bread taste extraordinary. The meal cost almost nothing yet felt ceremonial, requiring attention that gave structure to evenings that might otherwise blur together. For seniors eating alone, the process of dipping and eating provided small entertainment alongside nourishment. Fried rice was the kitchen's answer to, "What can I do with leftovers?" You took yesterday's rice, never fresh, always cold, and tossed it in a hot pan with oil. Add eggs if you had them. Add vegetables if they were not wilted. Add soy sauce and stir until everything sizzled. Sometimes there was meat, bits of chicken, strips of Spam, leftover pork chops cut into tiny pieces. It was not a recipe. It was a response to scarcity. Every ingredient was a compromise that somehow came together as comfort. You learned to make it without measuring, without rules, just instinct and need. But often, it was just rice and hope. Fried rice was the clean-out-the-fridge dish, the we-cannot-waste-anything dish. It was salty, savory, and never tasted the same way twice. But it always worked. It fed a crowd, it reheated well, and it made you feel like a real cook, even if all you did was throw things in a pan. You did not need a name for this dish. You needed a baking dish, a few potatoes, an onion, and whatever loose ground pork the butcher sold at the end of the week for almost nothing. Thin sliced potatoes first, then raw ground pork crumbled across the top, Then more sliced onion, salt, pepper, and a splash of whole milk. Foil tight, 300 for an hour and a half. The fat from the pork rendered down through the potato layers, the milk created a thin steam, and the layers compressed under the weight of the meat until the whole dish came out as one thing rather than 3 ingredients. This is the logic of peasant cooking in a casserole dish. The understanding that fat, starch, and moisture applied slowly and sealed will produce something richer than its parts suggest. During the Depression years and beyond, this was common in rural, Midwestern, and Southern households where every part of the animal was used and nothing that could still feed someone was discarded. Number 23. Tomato soup cake. You measured a can of Campbell's condensed tomato soup straight into the mixing bowl, and you got a spice cake out of the oven that nobody could place. The recipe showed up in community cookbooks around 1928, when eggs and milk were too expensive, and the soup did the work of dairy. The cake came out moist and dense, with a cinnamon and clove crumb that tasted like a campfire spice cake. Campbell started printing the recipe on the soup label in 1960. Your great-aunt frosted it with cream cheese, served it on a Sunday plate, and let your uncle ask 3 times what kind of cake it was. She never told. The tomato acid activated the baking soda and gave the cake a tight crumb you cannot get with milk. The genius was always the sleight of hand. Nobody at the table knew they were eating a soup can. Moussaka is a rich, layered Greek casserole that marries slices of eggplant with ground meat and a creamy bechamel sauce. This dish has Middle Eastern origins but was perfected in its modern form by Greek chef Nikolaos Tselementes in the early 20th century. Preparing moussaka involves frying slices of eggplant, layering them with a spicy meat mixture traditionally made with lamb or beef, and then smothering it all under a luscious bechamel sauce. Once assembled, it's baked until the top turns a tempting golden brown, offering a deep, flavorful feast. Moussaka made a name for itself in Greek cuisine and entered American dining scenes in the mid-20th century, often served with a side salad or bread for a balanced, fulfilling dinner. Seafood was a popular protein choice, as clam bakes were a go-to dinner food in Connecticut. You could find a good clam bake plate for dinner anywhere from homes to restaurants, diners, and even pubs. Clams were a classic seafood in Connecticut because they were harvested and locally produced. European immigrants brought stuffed cabbage to American kitchens in the late 19th century, from Poland, Hungary, Ukraine, Czechoslovakia, and the recipes differed by village and by family. The Hungarian version called for a touch of sugar in the tomato sauce. The Polish sometimes layered sauerkraut beneath the rolls before braising. What all versions shared was the method. A whole head of cabbage into boiling water, outer leaves peeled off one at a time as they softened, each packed with ground beef, raw rice, and onion, tucked and rolled firm. Seam down in a pot, covered in tomato sauce, 2 hours low. The house took on the smell of cabbage softening in tomato, sweet and slightly funky, a smell that places you in that specific kitchen the moment you encounter it again, decades later. She knew they were done by pressing one roll with the back of a spoon and reading what she felt there. That knowledge existed nowhere on paper. The rolls stopped coming to family tables one generation at a time, the first losing patience for the rolling, the second not knowing the rolling had ever been something to lose. For generations, baked cod was a dependable, no-fuss dinner, particularly in coastal and New England households. Light, flaky, and mild in flavor, cod was one of the most affordable fish available, making it a practical choice for families looking to put a nutritious meal on the table without overspending. Topped with a crisp breadcrumb and herb crust, this dish was both simple and satisfying. Proof that great cooking didn't need to be complicated. Cod's popularity was tied to its abundance. Throughout much of the 20th century, fresh or frozen cod was readily available at grocery stores and fish markets, and it didn't require elaborate preparation. A coating of breadcrumbs, butter, and fresh herbs locked in moisture while creating a crunchy golden brown topping. Baked rather than fried, this dish had a lighter texture, making it a favorite among those who wanted something hearty without being heavy. So why did it disappear? Overfishing led to shortages, making cod more expensive, and as frozen fish sticks and pre-breaded fillies flooded supermarkets, Many home cooks stopped preparing fish from scratch. Stone crab claws were also just as special in the East Coast and Florida. Eating stone crab claws was an incredible experience. People would either go fishing on their own during harvest time to find the crabs or watch seafood restaurants bring out fresh crabs. The crab would absorb a lot of flavors and could be cooked in just about any method a person preferred. Canned tomato sandwiches were the taste of summer when nothing else was left in the fridge. You'd pop open a can of whole or sliced tomatoes, drain them just enough to stop the bread from falling apart, then slather both slices with mayonnaise. A sprinkle of salt and pepper went on top, maybe a little sugar if you came from the South, and that was lunch done. It was cold, slippery, messy, and perfect all at once. The juice soaked into the bread, softening it until every bite felt like a mix of tang and cream. It wasn't a fancy sandwich, but it was the one that kept bellies full on long, hot afternoons when money ran out before the month did. Some people added lettuce if they had it. Most didn't bother. It was simple, nostalgic, and surprisingly satisfying. The flavor was sharp, honest, and comforting in a way that no processed meal could be. It didn't matter that it came from a can. It still tasted like home. Every bite told a story of resourcefulness and grace under pressure. For families in the 1980s, canned tomato sandwiches were proof that even the simplest things could feel like love. Number 16. Squirrel gravy on biscuit. A small squirrel, dressed and cut into 4 pieces, dredged in flour and pan fried in lard until the outside is the color of a roasted chestnut. The pieces come out. The brown bits in the skillet get a spoon of flour, then a cup of milk whisked in slow until the gravy thickens. The flavor is rich, almost beefy. The squirrel goes back to warm. One biscuit split open, the meat laid on top, the gravy poured over. Joseph Dabney called this the most underrated supper in the Southern Mountains. For a senior in a hill kitchen, one squirrel is one supper, and the leftover gravy is breakfast on a piece of toast. Fried catfish was a no-brainer for Arkansas because the state is quite literally flooded with catfish. Readily available fish and locals who love fried food led to the creation of fried catfish. A rather interesting way to cook catfish, fried catfish reached the peak of its popularity in the 70s, becoming common at most family dinner tables. Delaware was also serving seafood dinners as the blue crab boil was a sought-after dinner. Famously covered in Old Bay seasoning, the blue crab boil came with rosemary, sage, pepper, and of course, the freshest crabs in Delaware. People would enjoy corn on the cob, potato wedges, and an assortment of grilled vegetables with the boil. The word mazeln actually ends up coming from mestillon in Old French, which means to mix, and that's exactly what mazelon bread is. If you wanted an idea of what a medieval mixed loaf would look like, then look no further. It was very common to see this in England, France, and the Low Countries, especially between 1000 to 1500 years. Mazelon was one of the most common kinds of bread for a specific reason, and this is actually because the climate was decently different in medieval times. Wheat was something that was born in more humid climates, so it struggled in northern and upland areas. Rye was a lot more reliable, on the other hand. It was known for also producing a darker bread that would keep you full for longer. People would get whatever wheat they had, mix it with rye, and get this loaf that was dense from rye but fluffy and soft from the wheat. It was a very interesting kind of loaf, really, and while we have several mixed grain breads in today's time, this was one of the easiest ways to spice up your daily routine back then. Cheese and crackers with apple slices assembled a complete supper without any cooking whatsoever, satisfying seniors who valued simplicity above all else. Sharp cheddar or American cheese was sliced from a block and arranged on a plate alongside saltines or wheat crackers. An apple, sliced into wedges and sometimes dipped in lemon juice to prevent browning, added freshness and fiber to the arrangement. The combination provided protein from cheese, carbohydrates from crackers, and vitamins from fruit in proportions that doctors would approve. This was particularly popular during summer months when heating the kitchen seemed unbearable, and appetites ran small anyway. The plate looked almost elegant despite requiring no skill beyond basic knife work. Seniors could eat at their own pace, assembling each bite according to preference. Cheese and crackers with apple represented the dignity of a composed plate rather than random grazing, turning simple ingredients into something that felt intentional and proper for people dining alone. Bread and milk bowl was perhaps the oldest and simplest supper in the American pantry, dating back centuries and persisting through every economic hardship. Seniors who remembered harder times often returned to this dish when cooking seemed too effortful and appetites had shrunk with age. The preparation required nothing more than tearing bread into pieces, placing them in a bowl, and pouring cold or warm milk over the top. Sugar was sprinkled according to taste, transforming the humble combination into something approaching dessert. Some preferred their bread and milk warm, heating the milk gently before pouring. Others liked it cold, especially during summer months. The bread softened quickly, becoming easy to eat with a spoon, gentle on sensitive stomachs and aging teeth. This was food stripped to its essence. For seniors eating alone, bread and milk represented self-sufficiency and comfort of familiar flavors, asking nothing and giving everything a tired body needed. Mock banana pudding was the sort of dish that showed just how inventive Depression-era cooks could be when real ingredients were simply out of reach. Bananas, once imported luxuries, quickly became too expensive for families to buy. To make up for it, people leaned on banana extract, which could be purchased cheaply and used sparingly to add flavor, layered with homemade custard, when eggs and milk could be spared, and stacked between vanilla wafers or leftover bits of stale cake. The pudding felt surprisingly close to the original. Families would chill it in an icebox if they had one, though often it was served warm right from the stove. For children, it was a rare treat that offered the illusion of a fruit dessert, even if no fresh fruit was present. In many homes, mock banana pudding became a stand-in for celebration desserts, stretching scarce supplies into something families could still enjoy together, and for many, it carried the sweetness of hope itself. Canned soup doctored with extras became an art form among seniors who understood that a simple can could become a proper meal with small additions. Campbell's tomato soup, cream of mushroom, or chicken noodle served as the base, but the magic happened in what came next. Leftover rice stretched cream soups into something more substantial. Crushed crackers thickened tomato soup while adding texture. A handful of frozen peas or a chopped hard-boiled egg transformed chicken noodle into something approaching homemade. Some seniors added a splash of milk to cream soups or a spoonful of butter to tomato. The entire preparation took under 10 minutes and produced a bowl of warmth that felt cared for rather than merely opened. For seniors eating alone, this small act of doctoring represented agency and creativity, turning industrial convenience into personal comfort. The soup might have started in a can, but it ended as something that tasted like someone had bothered to make it special. Talking about fried food, chicken cacciatore in California is chicken fried in olive oil and then simmered in a sauce of white wine, tomatoes, and herbs. Italian-American restaurants in the state absolutely love having this as either a main course accompanied with garlic bread. The balanced meal of bread, chicken, and tomato soup made for a perfect dinner spread. Chimichangas are a deep-fried burrito with lots of peppers to add a pretty heavy kick depending on the sauce. Available easily in most states nowadays, chimichanga actually had their roots in Arizona. Macayo's Mexican Kitchen claims they put chimichangas on their menus first in the 1970s. Since then, the dish has ruled over Arizona as a good dinner food that can be served and enjoyed. Day-old bread was not a problem in those kitchens. It was an ingredient. The loaf that had gone hard by midweek got torn into rough pieces and layered over soaked navy beans, diced onion, crumbled bacon, and enough chicken broth to reach the top of the bread layer in a covered casserole. 300 degrees, 90 minutes. The bread absorbed every drop of broth and rendered bacon fat as it baked, going from stale and dry to dense and custard soft at the center, while the top pieces went golden and slightly crisp where they stayed above the liquid line. The beans cooked through in the steam and braising liquid, and the whole dish came out tasting of something more deliberate than it was. This was the philosophy behind all of it. Nothing wasted, not even the bread that had stopped being bread. She tore it into that dish without measuring, knowing by feel when it was enough. That knowledge, the feel of it, the instinct for when enough was enough, does not survive the person who carried it. Instant coffee meat rub was one of those oddball ideas that somehow worked. You'd mix instant coffee crystals with sugar, salt, and a pinch of flour, rub it on cheap cuts of meat, and throw it in the oven or pan. The coffee acted like a smoky glaze, turning the outside dark and caramelized while hiding the fact that the meat was tough as rubber. It was a poor man's barbecue, full of flavor and pride. Families used it for pork, chicken, or whatever protein happened to be on sale. The smell filled the house like something from a steakhouse, and everyone gathered around pretending it was a special occasion. Even if the meat was chewy, no one complained. The magic of that bittersweet crust fooled everyone into believing it was better than it was. It was one of those small miracles from a time when making dinner meant making do. Cottage cheese and canned fruit became staple supper for seniors who needed protein without cooking effort and welcomed sweetness without dessert guilt. This combination required nothing more than spooning cottage cheese onto a plate and arranging canned peach halves, pear slices, or fruit cocktail alongside. The curds provided protein and calcium, while fruit offered vitamins and comfort of something sweet. During the 1950s and 60s, this was considered health food, recommended by doctors for patients needing gentle nourishment. The cottage cheese came in different curd sizes according to preference, and canned fruit ranged from budget brands to premium varieties. Some seniors added cinnamon or honey when company feelings struck. The cost remained minimal, since both ingredients kept well and stretched across multiple meals. Cottage cheese and canned fruit represented the intersection of economy and nutrition that practical seniors navigated daily, providing satisfaction without demanding time or energy. Hot cereal with butter transformed humble oatmeal or cream of wheat into something almost luxurious on cold evenings. Seniors who grew up during the Depression understood that hot cereal stretched further than almost any other food, filling stomachs for pennies per serving. The cereal was cooked according to package directions, usually with water when milk needed stretching, then transferred to a bowl where a generous pat of butter was added along with salt, rather than sugar. The butter melted into golden pools on the surface, adding richness that made plain grain taste almost decadent. Some seniors stirred everything together while others let the butter remain in patches, each spoonful offering different proportions of creamy and plain. This savory preparation was common among those who preferred evening meals without sweetness. Hot cereal with butter represented economy and comfort combined, asking almost nothing of the cook, while delivering warmth on evenings when loneliness felt sharpest. Cinnamon toast delivered sweetness and warmth in under 5 minutes, becoming the default supper for seniors who craved comfort without complexity. The preparation was almost meditative. Bread was toasted until golden, then spread immediately with soft butter that melted into the warm surface. Sugar and cinnamon, pre-mixed in small jars kept near the stove, were sprinkled generously over the buttered surface. The heat caused the sugar to dissolve slightly, creating a thin, sweet crust that crackled between teeth. Some seniors placed their cinnamon toast under the broiler to caramelize the topping into something approaching candy. The aroma alone lifted spirits on difficult evenings. This was comfort food in its purest form, requiring nothing fancy and delivering everything needed. For widows and widowers eating alone during the 1950s and 60s, cinnamon toast meant dessert and dinner combined into one affordable, satisfying meal that tasted like childhood remembered. Barley and mushroom gravy bowl brought hearty texture and deep flavor to the dinner table using ingredients that cost only pennies per serving. Pearl barley was simmered until tender and spooned into bowls, then generously topped with a thick mushroom gravy made from sautéed onions, sliced mushrooms, and a splash of milk or broth. The barley's nutty chewiness paired perfectly with the savory gravy, creating a meal that was both comforting and surprisingly filling. This dish proved that meat was not necessary to achieve a rich, satisfying flavor, making it popular among families seeking economical vegetarian options. Barley stored well and cooked in bulk, so a single bag could supply multiple meals over the week. The recipe also welcomed leftovers, allowing home cooks to add bits of vegetables or herbs on hand without increasing the cost. Served with a simple green salad, barley and mushroom gravy bowl became a quiet star of thrifty 1960s kitchens, showcasing how whole grains and careful seasoning could create a dinner that felt indulgent despite its humble origins. Salmon bakes in Alaska go much further back than you would imagine. Introduced in the 1800s, commercial restaurants only started to serve salmon bakes during the 1970s. Chinook salmon was one of the most widely caught fish in Alaska, and so locals created multiple dishes using it. Sardines on crackers represented pantry cooking at its most practical, requiring nothing more than opening a tin and arranging contents on whatever crackers were at hand. For seniors living alone during the 1960s and 70s, this combination offered complete protein and essential oils without any cooking whatsoever. The tiny fish came packed in oil, water, or mustard sauce depending on preference, and a single tin stretched across 2 meals when appetite was small. Saltine crackers were the traditional base, their neutral flavor providing contrast to the rich, briny fish. Some seniors added lemon juice or hot sauce to brighten flavors. Others mashed the sardines with a fork, creating a spread that distributed more evenly. The entire meal cost pennies and provided nutrients doctors recommended for aging bodies. Sardines on crackers were consumed at kitchen tables by people who understood that dignity in dining came from adequacy, not extravagance. Classic American dinners often include stews, and Brunswick stew from Georgia was especially popular in the 1970s. In terms of recipe, the stew had many variations from pulled pork to beef or chicken being used along with braised vegetables and Worcestershire sauce. Due to each home customizing the stew, it was bound to be a great hearty dinner. Creamed eggs on toast transformed breakfast ingredients into satisfying supper that cost almost nothing and came together in under 10 minutes. Seniors who survived the Depression understood that eggs were among the most affordable proteins, stretching further when combined with simple white sauce. The preparation began with melting butter in a saucepan, whisking in flour until smooth, then slowly adding milk while stirring until thickened. Hard-boiled eggs, already prepared and waiting in the refrigerator, were chopped and folded into this creamy base with salt and pepper. The mixture was spooned over buttered toast while still warm. The result was rich, filling, and deceptively elegant for something made from such humble ingredients. This dish fed widows and widowers across America during decades when eating alone meant cooking economically but eating well. The eggs provided protein while the toast gave substance, and the sauce made everything feel like someone had taken care. Number 3. Welsh rarebit on toast points. A sharp cheddar melted with butter, a splash of milk or beer, dry mustard, Worcestershire, and an egg yolk to thicken, ladled over 4 toast points cut diagonal, a slice of tomato on top if a hostess felt fancy. The dish was a 1950s and 1960s ladies' luncheon staple from Boston to St. Louis, and it doubled as a quick supper at home when the husband was working late. By 1965, it was in every Better Homes cookbook, complete with a chafing dish presentation. It vanished because nobody owned a chafing dish anymore, and the word rarebit started sounding old. The cheddar stayed, the toast stayed, but the dish went out with the doilies. You will find it on a few old hotel menus in Philadelphia. The hotel may still be open. The dining room is not. The Hungarians really killed it with dinners that shaped our childhood, because we've got another banger on the list. Hungarian goulash was everyone's favorite cozy, hearty meal back in the day. Goulash is a hearty stew whipped up with tender chunks of beef simmered in a rich, savory sauce brimming with paprika. Yeah, paprika was huge back in the day. So why did this delicious dinner vanish from our dinner tables? Well, the Hungarian goulash traces back as far as the 10th century to stews eaten by the shepherds, so you can say this one might just have run its course. But hey, if you're ever craving goulash, dust off some old cookbooks and get to work because it really isn't hard to wump up. This is the perfect dish for a chilly night in, curled up on the couch with a good movie. Just be careful not to spill it on your mom's vintage tablecloth. Those things are irreplaceable. Swiss chard is a leafy green we don't hear too much about anymore, and that was the case back then too. I don't blame people, since its glory days were definitely before the 20th century. But people remembered this little green once again during the Dust Bowl. People would pair this up with white bean soup, which was something that the masses found it very hard to live without. Why? They were a fabulous source of protein, they are affordable, You could even forage them, and these could actually be stored for months. This was a time where people were desperate for protein, by the way. A lot of good cuts of meat were more expensive than ever, and just out of the reach of most common people, while a lot of other kinds of things like nuts and almonds just weren't filling you up enough for the amount of money or time it would take to get enough of them. You had to be really smart with every cent, so people would go for things like white bean soup with Swiss chard. This was a versatile combination that had every pro health-wise on top of being something that could feed the entire family and be made with minimal effort. Number 9. Tuna noodle casserole. 2 cans of chunk-light tuna, a bag of egg noodles, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, and a handful of crushed potato chips spread across the top. Mix everything in a baking dish, slide it into a 350-degree oven, and walk away for half an hour. When it came out, the edges were bubbling and the chip topping had gone brown and crispy. This casserole appeared in church cookbooks in every single state, and for good reason. It fed 6 people, required about 10 minutes of actual work, and you could assemble the whole thing from ingredients that sat in the pantry for months. Frozen peas were the most common addition. Some families threw in a handful of shredded cheddar before the chips went on, and those families never went back to the plain version. Tuna noodle casserole was not a proud dinner. It was a dependable one, and sometimes dependable is exactly what a Tuesday night calls for. Number 6. Fried bologna sandwich for supper. You laid a slice of Oscar Mayer bologna in a hot, dry skillet, cut 4 shallow slits around the edge so it would not curl, and fried it 90 seconds aside until the surface was a dark, blistered brown. You slid it onto soft white bread with yellow mustard. That was supper for a coal miner in Harlan County in 1955 and a single mother in Akron in 1981. Bologna was the cheapest meat in the deli case from the war through the 1979 recession. 29 cents a pound in 1968, 69 cents a pound in 1980. Your grandfather called it Kentucky steak. He was not joking, and he was not ashamed. He worked 38 years underground. The slits in the edge were the engineering most people miss. Without them, the bologna ballooned in the middle, and the edges burnt black before the center got hot. With them, the slice stayed flat and the surface caramelized like a thin steak. Molasses jugs were the sweetness in a bitter life. Cheap and long-lasting, molasses could turn the plainest meal into something special. You could drizzle it on cornbread, stir it into beans, or mix it with hot water for a makeshift tea. It had a deep, smoky sweetness that tasted like comfort itself. Poor families loved it because it was cheaper than sugar and lasted 10 times longer. A single jug could see a household through months of tight times. Kids dipped biscuits in it, farmers used it to sweeten their coffee, and mothers poured it into cakes when they wanted to feel fancy. That thick, dark syrup was more than food. It was memory in liquid form. When money was thin and cupboards nearly bare, molasses was the one indulgence you could still afford. It reminded people that joy could still exist in small, sticky spoons. Pork chops with scalloped potatoes was a duo so perfectly matched, it's as if they were destined to share the same plate. This meal became a dinnertime favorite for its balance of simplicity and satisfaction. Tender, pan-seared pork chops alongside creamy, cheesy potatoes. It's no wonder it earned its spot in the hearts and stomachs of families everywhere. The secret to scalloped potatoes lies in their layers. Thinly sliced potatoes are smothered in a rich, velvety sauce made from milk or cream, often with a touch of cheese, and baked until golden and bubbling. The dish likely evolved from French gratin dauphinois, but American cooks put their own spin on it by using cheese more liberally. Pork chops, on the other hand, have always been a practical choice for home cooks. Affordable and quick to prepare, they pair perfectly with the creamy potatoes, creating a meal that's hearty yet approachable. To many, the crispy edges of the potatoes and the seared crust on the pork chops were the best part. This meal is like a warm hug in casserole form. The only downside is that it's impossible to stop at just one serving. And really, who would want to? Some of the best dishes come from necessity, and few ingredients are as dependable as potatoes. For generations, scalloped potatoes were a staple at homecoming dinners, potlucks, and Sunday feasts. Thinly sliced and baked in a rich, velvety sauce, They were a testament to the idea that simple ingredients, when treated right, could feel downright luxurious. Potatoes were the backbone of many American kitchens. They were cheap, easy to store, and could feed an entire family without much effort. The addition of a creamy sauce, made from milk, butter, and a touch of garlic, elevated this humble dish into something special. Some versions kept it simple, while others included layers of cheese, turning it into a gooey, golden masterpiece. Either way, it was a comforting, belly-filling side that paired well with just about any main course. The cooking process required patience. Proper scalloped potatoes weren't rushed. Each layer had to absorb the sauce, and the top needed time to develop that perfect golden crust. But as boxed potato mixes and instant gratins took over, homemade scalloped potatoes started to fade from dinner tables. Number 4, biscuits and sausage gravy. You browned a half-pound of pork sausage, crumbled it fine, sprinkled 3 tablespoons of flour over the meat, stirred a full minute, then poured in 2½ cups of whole milk and thickened the gravy with a heavy crank of black pepper. You split 4 buttermilk biscuits, ladled the white gravy over the top, and served it for breakfast or supper or whatever meal needed feeding. The dish was born in late 1800s Appalachian logging camps where men needed 2,000 calories before sunrise. It traveled to every truck stop and every diner in the country, and it still costs less than $4 to feed a family of 4. The pepper is not optional. The pepper is the entire point. You will taste it for an hour after the plate is gone. The biscuit is the second engineering. A flaky biscuit fell apart. A drop biscuit, denser, made with cold buttermilk, held its shape under a full ladle. Number 3, ham hock and pinto beans. You rinsed a pound of dry pintos, soaked them overnight, and dropped them in a heavy pot with a smoked ham hock, a chopped onion, 2 garlic cloves, and 10 cups of water. You simmered 3 hours over low flame until the beans broke into a mahogany broth and the meat fell off the bone in soft, salty pieces. You served it in a bowl with a square of cornbread on the side and a splash of pepper vinegar on top. $3 feeds 8 people. The ham hock was usually free from the butcher because nobody else wanted it. The genius is the bone. The bone gives the broth its fat, its salt, and its body. You cannot fake it. You can only wait for it. The overnight soak was the thing nobody had to teach. Beans in cold water at bedtime were a quiet promise that supper was already half-cooked. Number 3, pot roast stretched across 3 days. A cheap chuck roast, 3 or 4 pounds, seared in a Dutch oven, and then braised low and slow for hours with onions, carrots, potatoes, and a cup of water. Day 1 was the roast dinner itself, carved thick and served with the soft vegetables and the pan juices poured over the top. Day 2, you shredded the leftover meat and piled it on white bread for hot beef sandwiches with gravy ladled over everything. Day 3, the bones and scraps went into a pot with whatever vegetables remained in the crisper, and you simmered it into a beef vegetable soup that tasted richer than anything you could buy in a can. 3 full dinners from 1 piece of meat. That was the math that kept families fed in the 1960s, and the women who did it needed nothing but a Dutch oven, a sharp knife, and the deep understanding that nothing edible gets thrown away. The pot roast was not one dinner. It was a 3-day plan, and the plan was simple. Everybody eats this week. Hamburger hash is the unsung hero of the frugal kitchen. Born out of necessity and ingenuity, this dish has been rescuing leftovers and stretching budgets for decades. The concept is simple. Ground beef, diced potatoes, and onions cooked together in a skillet. But its simplicity is exactly what makes it timeless. The origins of hash can be traced to the 17th century, when the term came from the French word hacher, meaning to chop. In America, it evolved into a practical way to repurpose leftover meats. By the 20th century, hamburger hash became a staple in many households, particularly during tough economic times, when every ingredient had to count. Potatoes were the perfect partner, cheap, filling, and versatile. Onions, meanwhile, brought a touch of sweetness to balance the savory beef. Some cooks added a sprinkle of paprika or a dash of Worcestershire sauce for an extra punch of flavor. While it may not have the glamour of a Sunday roast, hamburger hash had one major advantage. It came together fast, a blessing on busy weeknights. Hamburger hash proves that even leftovers can shine, especially if you fry them just right. It's a humble dish with a big heart, reminding us that great meals don't need complicated recipes. For families stretching their grocery budget, few meals delivered as much flavor and comfort as these unusual-looking meatballs. A product of the Great Depression and wartime rationing, porcupine meatballs were a creative way to make ground beef go further. Mixing rice into the meat wasn't just for texture, it bulked up the meal, making a pound of beef feed more mouths. Rice was an affordable pantry staple, and when the meatballs simmered in a tangy tomato sauce, the grains softened and expanded, giving them their signature spiky appearance. Despite the name, no porcupines were harmed in the making of this dish. Just a bit of kitchen ingenuity at work. Some recipes used canned tomato soup for a mild, creamy sauce, while others relied on crushed tomatoes and Worcestershire sauce for a sharper kick. Either way, the slow cooking process allowed the flavors to meld into a hearty, stick-to-your-ribs meal. For decades, this dish was a go-to for busy home cooks. It was easy, required minimal ingredients, and could be made in one pot, ideal for feeding a growing family. But as convenience foods and pre-made meatballs filled grocery store freezers, the homemade version started to disappear. Number 8. Hobo stew. Ground beef, canned corn, canned green beans, canned tomatoes, sliced potatoes, and a diced onion. Everything went into one pot, covered with water, and simmered until the potatoes turned soft and the starch thickened the broth all on its own. No browning the meat first, no complicated seasoning. Just salt, pepper, dump, and simmer. The name came from the Depression, when men riding freight trains pooled whatever scraps they could find and cooked them in a single pot over an open fire beside the tracks. By the 1960s, hobo stew had migrated into regular kitchens as the go-to meal for using up 3 cans of vegetables before they collected dust. It was not delicate, it was not attractive, it was everything you had in one pot, and that was the whole honest point. Number 8. Liver and onions with brown gravy. You sliced a pound of beef liver, dredged it in seasoned flour, and fried it in bacon grease 2 minutes aside. You pulled the liver out, cooked 2 sliced onions in the same pan until they were dark and sweet, then poured a cup of beef broth in to scrape up the brown bits and thicken the gravy with the leftover flour on the meat. Liver was the cheapest cut at the butcher counter for 65 years. It is full of iron and B12, which is why Depression-era doctors prescribed it for tired mothers and growing children. You ate it because it was free or close to it. You remember it because your grandmother soaked it in milk for an hour first, and that is the trick that made it tender. The second trick was the heat. You never cooked liver past medium. More than 2 minutes aside and it turned to leather. Pink in the middle, crisp outside, under dark, sweet onions. Number 7. Rice and pan drippings. A cup of long-grain white rice cooked on the stove, topped with the saved drippings from whatever meat you fried the night before. Bacon grease, sausage fat, the rendered drippings from a pork chop. You spooned it hot over the rice and stirred until every grain was coated and glistening. In the rural South, rice and drippings showed up on the table at least once a week, and the women who made it kept a coffee can of saved grease on the back of the stove the way other families kept a sugar bowl on the counter. It sounds plain because it was plain. But the fat carried a depth of flavor that no store-bought seasoning could touch, and a bowl of it on a cold evening in January settled something deep and quiet in your chest. Number 6. Tomato soup and grilled cheese. A can of Campbell's tomato soup made with milk instead of water, and a sandwich built from white bread, butter, and 2 slices of American cheese pressed flat in a hot skillet until the bread turned golden and the cheese pulled into strings when you tore it apart. This combination became so deeply embedded in American childhood that it works more as a memory than a recipe. Sick days home from school, snow days with the television on, Saturdays when both parents worked and the oldest kid made lunch for everyone else. Together, the soup and sandwich made a meal that felt like being taken care of, even if you were the one doing the cooking. Some meals survive not because they are impressive, but because they are kind. This was the kindest dinner in America. Number 1. Potato soup. 5 or 6 potatoes, peeled and cubed, boiled in salted water until they were soft, then mashed right in the pot with a fork. A lump of butter, a pour of milk, salt and pepper. That was the whole recipe. It was the dinner you made when there was genuinely nothing else in the house, and it was somehow the dinner that tasted the most like home. In kitchens all across this country, from the 1930s through the 1970s, potato soup meant the money was gone, but the family was still together at the table. Grandmothers made it without thinking twice. Mothers made it with a knot in their stomachs, hoping the children would not notice how thin things had gotten. And most of the time, the children did not notice at all, because the soup was warm, and the kitchen was warm, and their mother was standing right there at the stove. That is what all 25 of these dinners really were. Not recipes. Proof that love still shows up in a pot on the stove, even when nothing else does. Number 9. Bean and bacon soup over crackers. You crumbled 2 strips of bacon into a pot, sweated half a chopped onion in the fat, added 2 cans of navy beans with liquid, a can of tomato sauce, 3 cups of water, salt, pepper, and a bay leaf, and simmered 45 minutes. You served it in a bowl over a handful of crushed saltines. Campbell's started selling bean and bacon soup in a red and white can in 1908, and by the worst years of the Depression, it was the cheapest hot calorie a family could buy at the grocery counter. 11 cents a can. It fed 3 people. The crackers were the second meal hiding inside the first one, because they thickened the broth into something that ate like a stew. Your father drank the last spoonful straight from the bowl. Your mother never said a word. The genius was the math. A sleeve of saltines cost a nickel and stretched the soup into 2 suppers, because the broth that would have evaporated was bound by the cracker starch. Number 5. Chicken fried steak. Cube steak, the cheapest cut of beef on the shelf, pounded flat with a meat mallet and coated in seasoned flour, dipped in beaten egg and coated again. You fried it in a half-inch of vegetable oil until the crust turned golden and shattered when you pressed a fork through it. The white cream gravy came right behind, built in the same pan from the leftover flour and drippings with whole milk stirred in until it went thick and smooth. Chicken fried steak was born in Texas, raised by German and Czech immigrants who carried schnitzel traditions into cattle country, and by the 1950s it had taken hold in every diner and kitchen from Oklahoma to Alabama. The steak cost almost nothing because cube steak was the cut no one else wanted. The breading did the work of making it feel like a meal worth sitting down for. Number 4. Pinto beans and cornbread. A pound of dried pintos soaked overnight and simmered all day long with a ham hock, a halved onion, and enough salt to draw it all together. The cornbread was baked in a cast iron skillet greased with bacon drippings, and the bottom crust came out dark and crunchy and faintly smoky. You crumbled the cornbread into a deep bowl, ladled the beans over the top, and ate it with a raw sliced onion on the side if you grew up in the right part of the country. Across the South and the Ozarks, pinto beans and cornbread was Monday dinner every single Monday, because the beans needed a full day to simmer, and Monday was wash day, the day you stayed near the house anyway. The whole meal cost pennies. The ritual of making it cost nothing at all. Number 10. Salmon patties from a can. You opened a 15-ounce can of pink salmon, drained it, mixed in an egg, half a cup of saltine crumbs, a spoon of minced onion, and pepper. You shaped 6 patties, fried them in a 1/4 inch of bacon grease for 3 minutes aside, and you had a Friday supper that fed 5 for less than $1 in 1962. Canned salmon was a backbone of poor American kitchens from 1900 straight through the Carter administration. Catholic families ate it on Fridays. Lutheran families ate it because it was cheaper than chicken. Your grandmother served it with a slice of lemon and a dollop of mayonnaise mixed with sweet pickle relish. She called it a tartar sauce. It worked, and the bones were the secret. The soft little vertebrae in a can of pink salmon are pure calcium, mashed straight into the patty by your grandmother's fork. A single can delivered more calcium than 2 glasses of milk, which is why Depression-era doctors recommended it for nursing mothers. Number 1. Mock duck from sausage and bread. You browned a pound of ground pork sausage in a skillet with a chopped onion and a chopped stalk of celery, drained the fat, and stirred the meat into 4 cups of dry bread cubes with a beaten egg, a teaspoon of sage, salt, and pepper, plus enough warm chicken broth to bind the lot. You patted the stuffing into a loaf shape on a baking sheet, basted it with a tablespoon of bacon grease, and baked it at 375 degrees for 40 minutes until the outside was a dark brown crust. The dish came from Wisconsin and Minnesota farm kitchens in the 1930s, when a real duck was 3 days of paychecks. The genius is the sage. The sage smells like duck. The sage tastes like duck. The sage was already in the spice tin from the year before, free. Butterbean burgers were the quiet champions of the broke man's dinner table, turning pantry scraps into something worth savoring. You'd start with a can of butter beans, mash them until smooth, and mix in breadcrumbs, an egg, and a pinch of salt and pepper. When fried, the patties crisped up perfectly, the edges golden brown and the centers creamy like mashed potatoes. The beans brought a rich, earthy flavor that made you forget there wasn't any meat involved. You could serve them on bread with mustard, stack them like real burgers, or eat them straight from the skillet with a fork. They filled you up fast and cost next to nothing, a miracle in itself. Families loved how far one can could go, and kids didn't mind because they tasted good. It was one of those rare recipes that started from desperation but stayed for its flavor. Butterbean burgers proved that meat wasn't the only thing that made a meal feel whole. They were born from necessity but carried pride, the sound of sizzling oil marking another night conquered. Poverty taught people to adapt, but these burgers taught them to thrive. Number 7. Cabbage and noodle skillet. You shredded half a head of green cabbage, chopped 1 onion, melted 4 tablespoons of butter in a wide skillet, and cooked it slowly 25 minutes until the pan turned a sweet brown. You boiled half a pound of egg noodles separately, drained them, dumped them into the cabbage, salted heavily, peppered heavily, and ate it straight from the skillet. The dish came from Polish, Hungarian, and Slovak grandmothers who landed in western Pennsylvania between 1880 and 1925. A head of cabbage cost a nickel in 1934. It still costs less than $2. The cabbage is what a Johnstown family ate when the mill shut down in 1977. It still works. The heat had to stay low for the full 25 minutes. A hot pan turned the cabbage gray and sour. A patient pan caramelized the leaves and coated the noodles in a sweet, nutty glaze. Number 2. Navy bean soup. Small white navy beans simmered for hours in a deep pot with a smoked ham bone, diced celery, onion, and a couple of bay leaves. You stirred it now and then, and as the beans softened, they began to break apart and thicken the broth on their own without adding a thing. The United States Senate dining room has served navy bean soup every single day since 1903, and that tells you something about how seriously this country once took a simple bowl of beans. For ordinary families in the 1940s and 1950s, navy bean soup was the dinner you could make for practically nothing that still felt like sitting down to a real meal. The beans filled you up, the ham bone was free or close to it, and a single pot lasted 3 nights without losing any of its flavor. Quiet dinner, no spectacle, just a warm bowl, a piece of bread, and the steady knowledge that there would be more tomorrow. Number 10. Sloppy Joes from scratch. Not the Manwich version from the can. The real thing. Ground beef browned in a skillet, a generous squirt of ketchup, a spoonful of yellow mustard, a splash of Worcestershire, a pinch of brown sugar, and enough tomato paste to hold it all together. You simmered it until the sauce thickened and the kitchen smelled sweet and tangy at the same time, then spooned it onto soft hamburger buns and watched it drip down everyone's wrists. In the 1960s and 1970s, sloppy joes were the dinner that kids got genuinely excited about, the one meal where making a mess was part of the deal. School cafeterias served a thin, watery version, but the homemade kind had a deeper, richer taste because every mother adjusted the sweet and sour balance to her own family. There was no single recipe. Every house had its own ratio, and every single one of them was right. Number 11. Cornmeal mush fried in lard. You stirred a cup of yellow cornmeal into 4 cups of boiling salted water, cooked it 15 minutes until it pulled from the sides, poured it into a loaf pan, and cooled it overnight in the icebox. The next morning, you sliced it half an inch thick, fried the slices in a tablespoon of lard until the outside was a dark mahogany crust, and ate them with butter, sorghum, or a fried egg on top. Your grandfather grew up on this in Pennsylvania Dutch country in the 1920s, and so did half of the Midwest. 1 pound of cornmeal cost 6 cents in 1932 and fed 6 for 2 days. The genius is the pause. You cook it once and eat it 3 different ways across 2 days. Fewer dishes, less wood, more meals. And the cooling step was non-negotiable. A warm slab turned to pudding. A cold one held its shape like a Tuscan polenta cake. Number 1. Liver loaf with bacon strips. A pound of beef or pork liver ground fine with onion and parsley, mixed with crushed saltines and an egg, packed into a Pyrex loaf pan, draped with 4 strips of Armour bacon, and baked an hour at 350 until the bacon crisped and the loaf set. Sliced cold the next day for sandwiches on Wonder Bread with yellow mustard and a thin pickle slice. Through the 1960s, liver loaf was the dish a frugal mother made when she stretched a Sunday dinner into Tuesday lunch and Wednesday supper. The organ meat was cheap, about 30 cents a pound at the corner butcher. The bacon made it tolerable. The loaf went into the Frigidaire, wrapped in tin foil, and lasted 4 days. It vanished the moment American children grew up and refused to eat it themselves. Cornbread and milk was a Southern lullaby disguised as dinner. You took day-old cornbread, dry, crumbly, almost stale, and dropped it into a glass of cold milk. No sugar, no spice, just spoon and memory. It was humble food, the kind you did not question because your grandparents ate it too. Some people used buttermilk, others regular. It depended on what was left in the fridge and how soft you needed the bread to be. You ate it with a spoon, slowly, like it was soup. It filled you without asking for attention. It was cheap, simple, and oddly soothing. There was something honest about it, like admitting you had little but making peace with it anyway. In some homes, this was a treat. In others, a last resort. Either way, it kept bellies full and silence at the table. That matters more than most people know. Number 5. Peanut butter and onion sandwich. You spread 2 tablespoons of peanut butter on white bread, laid 4 thin rings of raw yellow onion across the peanut butter, sprinkled salt, and pressed a second slice on top. James Beard wrote about this sandwich. So did a generation of Depression-era columnists who needed cheap protein and an onion's flavor punch to stretch a school lunch. The sweet peanut butter and the sharp onion balance inside one mouthful, and the salt makes the bread taste like more bread. 5 cents in 1934. A buck and change today. Your great-grandfather ate one a day for 2 years during the worst stretch of his working life, and his blood pressure was the envy of his doctor. He was still eating them in 1978. The onion had to be sliced paper thin, raw, and yellow. A red onion was too sweet. A green onion did not bite. A thick slice of yellow onion overpowered the peanut butter and turned the sandwich into a dare. Thin rings on a sharp knife, 4 to a sandwich. Number 2. Frankfurters and sauerkraut. A pound of Oscar Mayer wieners simmered in a pot of jarred Bavarian sauerkraut with a tablespoon of brown sugar, a few caraway seeds, and a sliced apple thrown in for sweetness. Boiled potatoes on the side, a pat of butter on each one. The dish came out of German-American kitchens in Milwaukee and Cincinnati and the immigrant blocks of Yorkville in Manhattan. Through the 1960s, it was a Wednesday dinner in roughly 1 in 5 American homes. The Franks cost 49 cents a pound. The sauerkraut came in a quart jar for a quarter. It was the kind of dinner you could make in 20 minutes. By the time the 1980s arrived, hot dogs had become cookout food, sauerkraut had become a condiment, and the dish had been folded into history. The pot is still in someone's cabinet. The recipe is not. The smell of caraway in a warm kitchen still pulls a 65-year-old back to her mother's stove faster than any photograph. Number 2. Creamed peas on toast. You melted 3 tablespoons of butter, whisked in 3 tablespoons of flour for a full minute, poured in a cup and a half of whole milk, and stirred until the sauce coated a wooden spoon. You folded in a can of Le Sueur baby peas with the liquid, salted heavily, and ladled the green and white mix over buttered toast. That was Tuesday supper in an Illinois parsonage in 1944, when the meat ration was spent. That was Thursday supper in an Iowa farmhouse in 1965, when the harvest money had not come in. 25 cents in 1944, $1.50 today. Your grandmother served it with a glass of cold milk and a slice of pickled beet on the side. She did not apologize, and you did not ask her to. The canning liquid in the Le Sueur can was the part most modern recipes throw away, and they should not. The juice was already salted, lightly sweetened, full of pea starch, and it thickened the bechamel from the inside. The box of rice-a-roni had been in American cabinets since 1958, and by the early 1960s, it had become the standard dinner for anyone cooking alone who wanted something that felt more like cooking than it was. The technique was everything. Melt butter in the skillet, add the dry rice and broken vermicelli from the box, and toast them together, stirring constantly until the pasta turned amber and the rice went translucent. Then water, then the seasoning packet, lid on, heat down. Those 2 minutes of dry toasting gave the dish a nutty depth that plain boiled rice never had. The step people who didn't know the rule always skipped, wondering later why theirs tasted flat. Golden Grain Company developed the original in San Francisco, after co-founder Vince DeDomenico watched a neighbor combine rice and pasta in the early 1950s. 19 cents a box. You could eat it plain. You could pull in a leftover chicken thigh and call it a proper dinner. Either way, it was ready before you finished changing out of your work clothes. Dried saltfish was a poor man's meat, cheap, salty, and ready to last through any storm. Before refrigeration, this was how families near the coasts stayed fed all winter. Fishermen would pack the catch in layers of salt until the flesh turned firm and dry, locking in the flavor. Once you had it, all you needed was water and patience to bring it back to life. Rehydrated, fried, or stewed, it carried the taste of the sea and the grit of survival. Poor households found ways to stretch even a small piece into a full pot of chowder or beans. The smell might have been strong, but so was the satisfaction. Salt fish connected entire communities, from the docks of New England to the rural South, where people learned to turn scarcity into tradition. It was proof that with enough salt, skill, and determination, nothing had to go to waste. Pea and egg salad plate was a thrifty supper that turned humble staples into a refreshing main dish for a warm evening. Canned peas were drained and chilled before being folded with chopped hard-boiled eggs, diced celery, and a splash of mild vinegar dressing. A pinch of dry mustard or a spoon of mayonnaise added just enough richness to bind everything together while still keeping the cost low. Served on crisp lettuce leaves or alongside sliced tomatoes from the backyard garden, it provided protein and texture without any need for meat. Home cooks loved how quickly it came together using pantry items that were inexpensive and easy to find year-round. Children enjoyed the gentle sweetness of the peas, while adults appreciated the subtle tang from the dressing. This simple combination was light enough for summertime, but filling enough to carry a family through a busy evening, reflecting the practical yet creative spirit of mid-century kitchens, where canned vegetables and eggs formed the backbone of many dependable weeknight meals. Shepherd's pie was the meal of second chances. You took yesterday's meat, mixed it with whatever vegetables you had, canned peas, frozen corn, even just onions, and laid it down like the foundation of something better. Then you spread mashed potatoes on top like frosting, soft and thick and hopeful. Into the oven it went, and out came something that looked and smelled like you tried. It was the art of disguise. Leftovers turned into something new. Scraps turned into comfort. You scooped it out with a spoon, the layers blending together in a hot, savory mess that never looked perfect, but always felt right. It made the table feel full, even when the fridge was empty. And sometimes that illusion was all you needed to keep going. Shepherd's pie reminded you that with enough heat and time, even the broken pieces could come together. Apple peel jelly was the perfect example of depression frugality, showing how even scraps could become something sweet. When apples were peeled for pies or other dishes, Thrifty homemakers saved the skins rather than discarding them. These peels were boiled with sugar and water, sometimes with a bit of lemon peel, until they turned into a flavorful jelly. The jelly could be spread over bread, crackers, or biscuits, instantly brightening the table. It was not as rich as traditional jams, but for families who had little, it felt like a luxury. Children loved the sweet tang, and parents took pride in knowing nothing went to waste. Apple peel jelly was especially popular in rural areas where orchards were common, and every harvest meant piles of peels waiting to be reused. For families struggling through hunger, it was a reminder that comfort could be coaxed from even the most unlikely ingredients. It became both a necessity and a tradition, keeping hope alive through sweetness. Pea and egg salad plate was a thrifty supper that turned humble staples into a refreshing main dish for a warm evening. Canned peas were drained and chilled before being folded with chopped hard-boiled eggs, diced celery, and a splash of mild vinegar dressing. A pinch of dry mustard or a spoon of mayonnaise added just enough richness to bind everything together while still keeping the cost low. Served on crisp lettuce leaves or alongside sliced tomatoes from the backyard garden, it provided protein and texture without any need for meat. Home cooks loved how quickly it came together using pantry items that were inexpensive and easy to find year-round. Children enjoyed the gentle sweetness of the peas, while adults appreciated the subtle tang from the dressing. This simple combination was light enough for summertime, but filling enough to carry a family through a busy evening, reflecting the practical yet creative spirit of mid-century kitchens, where canned vegetables and eggs formed the backbone of many dependable weeknight meals. Powdered milk chocolate pudding was the sweet ending that made every tight grocery week feel worth it. You'd mix dry milk with cocoa powder, sugar, cornstarch, and a little water, whisking fast until it came together into a glossy brown dream. It simmered slow on the stove, thickening just enough to coat the spoon. Once it cooled, it went into reused butter tubs or chipped mugs, then straight into the icebox until firm. The first spoonful was pure bliss, smooth, sweet, and just chocolatey enough to make you forget how simple it was. Kids licked the pot clean, laughing at the sticky whisk marks on their fingers. Nobody cared that it wasn't real milk. What mattered was that it felt indulgent. Sometimes you'd top it with whipped cream from a can or a sprinkle of sugar if you wanted to be fancy. It was cheap, it was easy, and it made even the hardest weeks taste soft around the edges. Powdered milk chocolate pudding was proof that sweetness didn't come from money. It came from patience, persistence, and love stirred over a warm stove. Spoonfuls. Those were 100 homemade dinners that kept families fed, kept kitchens warm, and somehow got lost along the way. Most of them never made it into any restaurant or cooking show. They lived in handwritten recipe cards and in the muscle memory of the women who made them every single week. If one of these brought back a memory of your own kitchen, tell us which one it was in the comments. And if you want more meals like these, hit subscribe so you never miss the next one.